2024. We'll start with some consent agenda items, including the minutes of the October 21st, 2024 school board meeting and October 21st, 2024 annual meeting and budget. There are some professional staffing recommendations and co-curricular staffing recommendations. And as a new little wrinkle to our reading of the consent agenda items, is there anyone that would like to pull anything out of or separate it from the body of our consent agenda item this evening? I will assume that that means no. We also have, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thanks, Tom. Do I have a second?
I can second that.
Thank you, Megan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. There's also some personnel items not necessary for vote, and we have some public comments this evening. So before we get started on that, I'll do this little reading that I have. In accordance with School Board Policy 167.3, the McFarland School Board welcomes public comment during regular meetings from individuals who are present at the meeting, participating virtually, or have sent an email to the board president or superintendent. Participants are required to register to speak upon arriving at the meeting, provide their name, address, and any group affiliation before speaking, address only topics within the legitimate jurisdiction of the board, recognize that the board will not respond to comments during the meeting unless the item is on the published agenda, limit their comments to under 5 minutes or 600 written words, and of course maintain decorum. So we will start out, we have a couple, Samantha Zylinga. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Samantha Zylinga, and I am here representing Spartan Forward. As we approach the final hours before the election, I want to take a moment to reflect on what Spartan Forward has accomplished during this campaign and to express our gratitude for your dedication to McFarland students, educators, and families. Over the past months, Spartan Forward has been fully committed to engaging our community on this critical referendum. Throughout the campaign, we have distributed over 400 yard signs and 6 large signs across town, and we even put up a billboard. We have sent out over 4,800 mailers and over 12,000 text messages to ensure McFarland residents have the information they need to make an informed decision. The McFarland House Cafe graciously allowed us to spend over 30 hours campaigning in a tent at their cafe. Their hospitality has given us an important space to connect with the community, and we are so appreciative for their support. Our team has coordinated 15 op-eds, developed connections locally and statewide, and spent countless hours in meetings and on social media advocating for the needs of our schools. This level of community outreach has truly surpassed my initial vision for this campaign and is a testament to the passion and dedication of everyone involved in Spartan Forward. I would also like to express our sincere thanks to Aaron Turnitzer and Jeff Mahoney. They have been incredibly supportive throughout this process, answering our questions and listening to our input, which have been invaluable. Finally, I would like to thank each of you on the school board for your hard work and for your commitment to McFarland students and staff. Your dedication makes our community stronger, and we recognize the significant role you play in building a brighter future for our schools. No matter the outcome of this election, please know that Spartan Forward remains dedicated to supporting our schools, our educators, and most importantly, our students. We stand ready to work alongside you in every way we can. We also will hope that you will join us tomorrow evening at the bowling alley while we await results together. Thank you for your time, your trust, and your ongoing commitment to our schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Well done. Next is Melanie Robach. Is that the correct pronunciation of your last name? Robach. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you for making this space for public comments. My name is Melanie Roback, and I'm a McFarland parent of two. First, I want to thank you all, the school board and administration, for all your efforts to inform. I know that people are still watching the recorded info sessions. Watch one if you haven't, or skim the slideshow or the frequently asked questions on the website. It's illuminating, to say the least. I do think people finally understand there's a cap on school funding, and the state hasn't appropriately adjusted for inflation in over a decade. That's it. So the referendum question, and possibly every school referendum question around the state of Wisconsin this November, is basically this: should we empower our schools to budget for inflation? Yes or no? This is why, and I know it's not that simple, but this is why a record number of school districts in Wisconsin are going to referendum to cover basic needs. It's not about fancy new stuff or keeping up with the Joneses. It is by no stretch a matter of poor budgeting or greed. These are our schools, and no one's in it for the big bucks. It's about keeping up with inflation and increased competition during a teacher shortage. I know that your role is to inform and not advocate. So I worry sometimes that the stakes of this referendum get lost, and I wanted to highlight some of those stakes now. Most immediately at stake are our outstanding teachers and outstanding teacher retention, about 95%, as I understand it, compared to 89% and dropping around Dane County. As someone in education, this is huge, and it must be a big part of how you're leveraging near bottom funding to achieve above average performance, often top rankings in the county. Our retention, Craig, you said this, it's a unique person who goes into education. The demands relative to the money, it's an even more unique person who does it well. 20 or so kids in a classroom. Think of how we all do it at home, meeting the needs of 2, maybe 4. And it's an even more unique person who does it well and sticks with it. But McFarland schools, let's think about this. These have been competitive positions at every level for a long time. Our staff are here because they saw that conditions are ripe for thriving and being effective, which is an important part of loving it. And because they're the ones who made the cut. Then they find themselves in the company of talented colleagues, some of whom have been here for 10, 20, even 30 plus years. And this deep institutional history, our retirees will get this better than anyone. Long-term staff have decades of professional development under their belts in collaboration with other staff. The history and expertise isn't just stored in the individuals, but also in the deep spaces between the camaraderie, shared professionalism. It's like a family, an extremely competent family. I would guess this is probably a big part of why people love working here. The strong talent early on and outstanding retention has fed itself. And it takes a long time to build this up, and it's invaluable to everyone. We even feel this in our community, no doubt about it. This is a lucky combination, amazing staff. We obviously don't want to lose a single one, let alone 36, or whatever number will decide that teaching is hard enough, even under the best conditions, and know that they have other options. If our retention cracks, if this breaks, we'll be forced to compete to fill those positions. The quality gap will be great, and that'll be that for a long time. Cuts that impact class size and the number of assistants actually compromise that we parents tend to care most about day to day and that have the greatest impact on quality of education. Our teachers are skilled and they care. And there's only one per classroom, but the number of kids under their guidance and the number of support staff can vary a lot. Managing classroom learning and behavior is a delicate balance. Students might bring mental, behavioral, developmental challenges, while many others are primed and ready to learn, some dying for more of a challenge. They don't need all the same thing at the same time, and the combination of needs can conflict. These conflicts take time, thought, and highly skilled staff, sometimes enormous time, working through stories, resolutions, or misunderstandings. and staff can end up with their hands tied. You know, I'm going to just jump ahead here and say teachers, staff, admin, thank you so much. We see you and all that you're giving of yourselves, especially during this stressful time. We really can't thank you enough. And meanwhile, parents, there's no bad time to show our appreciation. An impromptu note, an email saying thanks, something extra for the lounge, even when it's not enough for everyone, goes a long way. Let's use the shout outs on the Contact Us page of the district website, and let's show them the love. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on, we have the McFarland High School Student Report.
And it looks like they have not joined this evening, so I wonder if they may not be providing a report tonight.
Should we just go ahead and skip to the administrator's report? Why don't we?
We certainly can. Lots of things going on in no particular order. The first one that I want to talk about is just to highlight that we had the high school play elsewhere this weekend, and I know some of you were able to attend. Really great play, kind of sort of in the round, so to speak, in the multi-purpose room, also known as the Black Box Theater. Was really excellent acting, great production. The amount of set changes and behind the scenes work was really impressive. So just a shout out to them for their great work.
Very timely, being around Halloween.
Yes, yes, it was very clever, very well done. We also received a grant. That's a little bit of a theme in my presentation tonight. One grant that we want to highlight is a grant with the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities. So we received a $5,000 grant, really for MRAP, and what that is about making our programming more accessible to people with disabilities, thanks to Stu Schaefer and Alicia Fix and Lauren Arango and many others who are involved in this. There'll be an advisory board that looks at things like our website, the programming, especially for those under 3 and over 18 that we provide through MRAP for people with developmental disabilities. So that's something that's very exciting, and will expand our programming, make it more accessible. A couple donations to recognize. We had recognizing Mary Ann Pilger, Pat McCoy, and members of the McFarland class of 1974 for donating towards student food service accounts. So they made a donation to offset some of the balances for some student accounts. So appreciate that. Must have been the tour. Yep, usually that's what sells them.
Do we know how much we still have outstanding?
It fluctuates by the minute, so I don't really know what it is. It just comes and goes. At this point of the year, it's typically not too bad at this point of the year, but that's something we'll keep an eye on and can bring back. Also, thank you to Jill Rundy. She donated funds to cover the lift rental costs for the stained glass window installation at the middle school. So that was something that several of us got together to fund that project, and there was an additional cost to rent a lift to put it in place. So she
Wow.
generously donated.
It is really beautiful.
Yes, turned out really nice if you haven't seen it.
Please give our thanks to all who did that.
Yeah. Yes, I will pass it along. There were several of us that donated our Cole Fellowship funds for that. And then another grant, the Gannon Family Grant, gave an award, many awards, but the one I'm going to highlight tonight is to Rachel Wyshawn and Eric Massey, middle school special education teachers, and they received a grant to create an accessible school garden at the middle school. So they're looking for staff, students, families, people that are willing to help to plan it, build it, plant, organize, care for that project. So there are going to be some raised beds that they have that are accessible and used with students with and without disabilities and community members. One of the things we always do in October is we do some professional development on bullying, harassment, and prevention. And Brittany Brazel led this work in October using the Speak Up model that she put together from a variety of resources. Last year was the first year we had used that model, and this year was a revisit of that. So thank you to her for her leadership, staff practicing how to intervene when they hear things that students are saying. Thank you to everyone that was involved in bringing the Mad Hatters here to the Performing Arts Center. So it was one of those things where we're really trying to provide opportunities for the community to come and use the facilities for non-school related events as well. And that was a great event. It was also a busy night with a football game, but still well attended, and we're looking forward to expanding those opportunities in the future. Another grant, go ahead, yes.
I forget what the fee was, the charge? That it was nominal versus when they appear on campus in November. It's like
Yes.
2 or 3 times as much.
Yes.
So if we can bring things here and the community knows that, yeah, you're providing top-rated performances.
Right.
And they'll pay far greater elsewhere. This is a good place to be.
Right, and it's so accessible and comfortable.
It
and
is.
It's just parking mostly good.
Too good not to use.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Another grant, the robotics team here at the high school, thank you to Neil Carney and applying for this grant through DPI, was awarded a robotics grant. In fact, if you're curious, they're kind of set up in the back room over there, getting ready and practicing and that work. So nice thing that can provide some materials for that robotics club that's started in the middle school and has expanded now the last couple of years to the high school. Had the superintendent listening sessions. Last year I did those twice with staff. This year expanding it to 3 times, so it was in each of the buildings. Had some great conversations with people, sometimes just eating lunch, sometimes talking about issues, questions, concerns that they had. So excited to have those. Those went really well. WIS Family Fun Night occurred since we met last. Was a great success. I don't know what the final numbers were. Last I knew there were over 600 people there. So it was hopping. Well designed. There's a lot of volunteers involved in that. I don't remember what the final number of volunteers are, 30, 40, something like that. A lot of high school students too, which was neat, volunteering. So it's conference season, so just want to thank the teachers for all their preparations. It's a ton of work getting ready for conferences, middle and high school and now elementary. So thank you to them. Thank you to families for taking advantage of those opportunities. Also had a great experience last week. We had a sort of a virtual visit from 2 really well-known, very popular, I would say famous, young adult authors. We had Jason Reynolds and Kwame Alexander that did a virtual author visit. So they talked about the writing process and what they do when they get stuck with the writing process. And we're one of a handful of schools that participated in that. We held that in the Performing Arts Center. And it was a really special moment when an author comes on the screen, and even though they're virtual, our students clap. They were so excited to see them. It was like somebody famous, because they are famous, but I mean, you would have thought it was a concert. So that was really neat. So amazing authors and good role models for our kids. And we had the calendar committee met last week. We'll be coming to you probably on December 2nd with a calendar. So that's exciting, looking at that for the calendar for next year. And coming up, we have the Employee Relations Committee meets next week. And we'll be talking about handbook changes. Health insurance is the hot topic for us right now. So at that point, we'll know the outcome of the referendum as well. So that will, I'm sure, influence our conversations. I do have some photos to share. As I'm doing that, I'm also going to share some upcoming events. We have the Courage Retreat tomorrow for the seventh graders. So a lot of high schoolers will volunteer for that, so that's a great event. We also have coming up, well, tonight, right now, is the sixth grade band, choir, and orchestra concert. So that's a really fun event. It was actually scheduled for tomorrow, and thought maybe not the best day to have a concert.
Urge,
It's all
Retreat?
day long.
it is.
It's all day long, yep. That usually culminates, my recollection's about 2:00 is when they have their closing circle. A really powerful event. We also have the 7th and 8th grade band solo fest coming up this week. It's the end of the first quarter, which really impacts the middle school only. We have staff development on Friday, no school. Veterans Day next week, many events actually throughout the district. The big ones are starting with breakfast here at the high school and then an assembly at WIS in the afternoon. Next week is School Psychologist Week. There's Reality Zone next week for the high school juniors. On the 12th, we also have the School and Village Board Joint Planning Committee meeting. That's going to be at 5:00 instead of our usual 4:00 time,
What date was that? I'm sorry.
the 12th. And then the middle school choir, orchestra, solo, and ensemble is also the 12th. The week of the 17th is American Education Week, and we'll meet on the 18th. Reminder, on the 18th, we also have the prospective school board member meeting just prior to our full meeting. So that'll be at 6:00 and our meeting's at 7. So have some pictures up here for you. You can see the students here, they harvesting some beans and corn and things that they grew in the community garden, so a lot of pride there. That is a big squash. Oh.
It's a big sunflower.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of a neat thing for our students. We had Mrs. Mishnick came and visited Ms. Davis's class and doing some critical thinking skills with our young learners, so very fun there. Then we had in second grade some little pumpkin experiments, doing some testing and experimenting with pumpkins here. You'll see that as a theme coming up. A little bit of a celebration. I thought this was really fun. They finished this book, The Tiger Rising, and you can see in the middle there, the students are simulating what it'd be like to create the Sistine Chapel by drawing on some things. They also did some soap carving because that was one of the characters in the book. Did some carving, so. And neat. All this, you can see this sort of hands-on experiential learning is a real theme with these pictures tonight. Similarly, seventh grade did they're doing a minute to win it there competition, I think trying to see how many times you can stand up in a certain amount of time for the civilization game. A lot of simulations, got to keep those students engaged, right? And those are great memories. I don't know if you saw this on social media, but in iCivics is the software program that has a electoral college activity, teaching kids about it through a simulation. And one of the things iCivics does really well is sort of gamify a lot of their learning and make it very interactive. So a big part of 8th grade curriculum there. Food truck unit, tacos, one of the things I miss the most about being at the middle school. My nose always found my way into the family consumer science wing when that was happening, but nice. That's such a neat project. I do think the previous family consumer sciences teacher started the food truck unit, I think. But it could have been Julie Tokheim as well. A great turnout for the fall craft fair, really fun event, so many vendors, and all of the funds from that go to the middle school and to serve the clubs there. So some extra sort of a fundraiser, but also a great community event, and really one of the custodians at the middle school, Tamra, does such a great job just organizing that just out of her kindness. So a lot of amazing things there. And also as part of that event, something they added this year is the unified club at the middle school organized an activity room for kids. So kids were able to come in and do some fun activities, sometimes allowing their parents to go craft, explore the space. So appreciate that, very creative idea. So you can see Katie Miller there, and co-advisor Michelle was there as well. The new class here at the high school, the legislative semester, where they simulate a legislative session, well underway, students proposing bills and advocating for that, running for office. Very competitive, but a neat activity that I've seen in other communities. My own kids went through a similar process in their district, and so excited to have that at the high school. So thanks to the teachers for organizing that. Of course, we had our 3 runners at cross country. Excited for them. Congratulations to them and their amazing accomplishments. But all of our athletes, this is the time of year where I think we're at the point now where our teams have concluded their season after this weekend. So, but a great job with the cross country team. Very proud. Fun to have the drum line on Friday for them.
It's got a very strong history of distance running and cross country
Yep.
as well.
Me too. Me too. A lot to be proud of. The GSA hosted Pronoun Day, so you could have your own, you can pick up a free pronoun pin. So very popular, had all those pins with different options for students to choose from. Fun activity. You can see, getting back to the theme of pumpkin exploration, doing a little bit of investigations with our pumpkins in Mrs. Lenning's class here at the high school. The MRAP hosted the flag football recognition event at the high school football game, and those students were really excited. Bit of a chilly night, a little bit, but they were having a good time and a lot of fun. And great program, very popular program. So those are the things that I was going to share. Are there any things the board members would like to share as recognitions?
The comment I would make, Aaron, the things that you presented over the past 5-8 minutes, it'd be a great promotional video for incoming parents. Just taking a look at the wealth of opportunities and experiences afforded by the
Good
district.
variety.
Yeah.
I think even for community members who don't have
Well,
kids
exactly.
in the
Yeah.
district.
Yeah.
Yep. I have a couple shout outs. I am grateful for Brittany Brazel, including the board in the Equity Summit that she, I think, organized with some colleagues. And it was professional development, I think, for
Yes.
teachers, right?
Uh-huh.
And there were breakout sessions, and I think the thing as a board member that I especially appreciated was in my small group, like I could really hear how staff members and educators were thinking about the subject matter and how their brains work. And it was just very clear to me that we have some really bright minds. So I'm really grateful that we were able to be included in that. And then also the work that the MFT has done to, get the word out about the referendum and everything. There's teachers taking extra time out of their, on their weekends to.
This last
Yes.
weekend.
Yeah. So that was a good chunk of the day on Saturday, I think. So just recognizing that there's a lot of people putting in a lot of effort to get our schools supported the way it needs to be.
That's for sure.
That's all I have.
Anybody have anything else? If not, we'll move along to our first action item. And that is action on McFarland High School Spring Early College Credit and Start College Now program requests. I would look for a motion to approve.
I can make that.
Thank you, Bruce.
I can second that.
Thank you, Megan. Discussion?
I just have one question. There's a student that wants to take like French 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Is that because we don't offer a similar class here?
No, we do offer those classes.
Those are 4 separate classes?
So it's different content altogether?
I think it's because they're taking it for
College credit?
Yeah, I saw there was like for 4 credits.
through the Start College now,
Okay,
as opposed to, you know, the other programs where it's a course isn't offered
Mhm.
here.
okay.
I know that was not uncommon in the past.
We don't offer, I can't, each year it varies. I can't remember if we're offering French 4 this year.
Anything else?
Can't recall.
Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously 5-0. Next is action on first reading of policies 0164, meetings, 2131, educational outcomes and expectations, 3120.204, employment of substitutes, 3120.08, employment of personnel for co-curricular extracurricular activities, 3431, short-term leaves of absence, 4120.04, employment of substitutes, 4431, short-term leaves of absence, 5200, attendance, 5505, academic honesty, 5610, suspension and expulsion, 5771, search and seizure, 8510, wellness, 8540, vending machines, 8550, competitive food sales, 5460.03, WEVA high school graduation requirements, 5460.04, Destination Career Academy high school graduation requirements, and 5460.05, Insight School of Wisconsin high school graduation requirements. Do I have a motion to approve?
I can make that motion.
Thank you, Megan. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Discussion. Would you like to break these out and go one at a time?
Right.
Yes,
I have
please.
several.
Okay. Action on first meeting, 0164. 2131, educational outcomes and expectations.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Mooney.
Under academic skills and knowledge, letter D, the skill and aptitudes that will further lifelong intellectual activity and learning. The other 4 items are all measurable. D, skills can be measurable, but how do we measure attitudes?
Pretty
And
subjective.
if we can't measure it, should it be in there?
That's difficult. It's like measuring effort or, you know, anything that's kind of intangible.
So the question is, should it be in there?
Well, I guess my question is whether it comes from statute, which means we don't, you
I
know,
don't, well, maybe.
and I have to look that up. So I can look up and see if it's in statute or not. But if not, sometimes they list those things.
Did you have more time?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say, if it is statute, then I think we have to get to the legislatures and give them a short lesson on measurable
Yeah.
objectives or goals.
Yeah, it certainly would not end with that one.
True.
No.
But yes,
True.
if it is not, so it sounds like if it's not required, eliminate it.
Right. And then under citizenship, item G, again, they talk about an appreciation and understanding of different value systems. Again, how do we measure appreciation? Understanding we can measure, but not appreciation. And then under H, and maybe I'm not caught up in the most recent thing, and understanding all grade levels of human relations, particularly with regards to American Indians. Is that politically correct, or is Native Americans politically
That
correct?
does come from statute. I mean, that is the term that's required
American
under
Indians?
Act 31.
I think
yeah.
indigenous is
Or indigenous? Is this a
more
new?
commonly used.
I
Either
think
way, it feels like it's
almost
outdated.
interchangeable though, from what I'm understanding.
My question is, have they been using American Indians for years, for decades? If they have, it's time probably for a change in terminology.
Yeah, that's true.
And then under personal development, letter C, appreciation is there again? I just posed the question.
Tough to
If it-
quantify.
If it's not measurable, I don't think it should be in there. And that's all I have for this policy.
Okay,
I had a couple in this policy.
there you go.
So in the first paragraph, it talks about the district's mission. And I don't know, I wonder if we want to update that to match our current mission more. I think this is more relatable to our former mission.
Good catch.
I'm pretty sure. So maybe we want to just update that.
That's very good, Megan. I think you're right.
Thank you. And then in C, under academic skills and knowledge, they talk about the responsibilities, and again, if this is statutory, from the statutes, then there's not much we can do about it besides giving lessons to the legislature. But in C, when it says the responsibilities of the family as a consumer, cooperative marketing, and consumers cooperatives, I feel like of the family as a consumer, like, do we really need that part? Can it just be about consumers? It feels more inclusive to leave out I don't
That's
know.
understood.
Yeah, so I don't know, something to consider. Again, I think in E, under the same section, it feels like outdated terminology about computer science, computer applications and the social impact, and I wondered if we wanted to change it to current technology, because technically, computer science includes a lot of different things, but the academic skills and knowledge that we're expecting kids to know now is way beyond that. So that was one question.
Another good catch.
Then under personal development, and again, this might be statutory, most of the things that I tend to take issue with end up being statutory issues. Under letter B, number 2, they talk about in the last sentence, maintaining a healthy weight. I don't think that that's applicable anymore. I know that health and wellness is moving away from
Yeah.
weight as a
Yeah.
number.
They did move
Right.
that out.
So, yeah, and I think in later policies that we're talking about, they talk about something different. So I wonder if we want to change it to maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Or something there. Let's find out if it's statutory and then, figure that out.
Yeah, because we don't have any date on here as far as when it was last revised or
Yeah,
created.
April of 2019. So,
Oh,
last revised,
okay, yeah.
pretty long ago.
Mhm.
So I'm not surprised that there would be outdated language in there.
It could be outdated year to year.
So, just so you know, I'm multitasking here. I will double check all of them, but I can already see a lot of this is right out of the statute.
Yeah, okay.
So, like, for example, that D, the skill and attitudes one is right out of there. Computer science is right out of there.
Okay.
So how do we ever attempt to have that corrected, Aaron? Yeah, if we just keep saying it's statutory, year after year.
Yeah, so that would require the
State law,
legislators.
legislature.
But we have to
Somebody
start somewhere.
proposing,
Yeah.
yeah.
Would that be something that the WASB, like all of those
Legislative.
changes that
Mhm.
they asked to bring
I mean, like
forward?
for the
For the
convention?
convention, yeah. Doesn't it fall in that category? I'm not totally sure how that works.
It
I
could,
would
but,
think so.
yeah, it just means they're gonna advocate for it, but it certainly doesn't mean that it would change.
All right.
Yeah, in fact, all of this
We'll
personal
bring up the same changes
development.
next year.
Well, that's what I
Thanks for
mean.
getting
You
that
could
answer right
change it
away.
year to year sometimes.
The
Right,
healthy
it's true.
weight is in there.
Which I think is interesting, because it's definitely in another policy later.
Yep, I
That
have
was
it.
up, that was, Neola pushed for changes. I think it was statutory changes. They make that change. So, I don't know.
Maybe it's Neola that we go through with
That's a good
proposed
question.
changes.
They certainly can try. I don't think they have any political influence, but
Okay.
Any more on 2131? If not, we'll go to 3120.04, employment of substitutes. Anything there?
I had a question about the option. It's in the fourth paragraph, that talks, it looks like it's an optional paragraph and we're choosing not to enact it, about background checks. Is it, but we still do background checks for
We-
substitutes? Is it
yeah,
because we
well,
go through the third party?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we don't employ, they do the background,
Okay,
they do background checks, they're the employer.
okay. So we're taking it out of our policy because we are not technically the employer.
Right, and it references an administrative guideline that we don't use, the
Got it.
AG.
Yep, okay, perfect.
Yep.
Anything else there?
It just shows you though, I mean, to me, this reflects the shortage of substitutes.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, it just
yep.
shows you.
3120.08, employment of personnel for co-curricular and extracurricular activities. Anything there? If not, 3431, short-term leaves of absence. Anything there?
And some of these we just reviewed in August,
Yep.
just for the public who are maybe wondering.
4120.04, employment of substitutes again. 4431, short-term leaves of absence again. 5200, attendance.
Yes, I have some here.
Okay?
It's more of a commentary. I know children between the ages of 6 and 18, it's mandatory that they attend school, whereas 4K and 5K, it's optional.
Mm-hmm.
And my comment is this. I think we're missing that great window of opportunity for kids to be learning, because we know those are pivotal years for kids to be learning new things, skills, attitudes, just getting along with kids. And I just find it ironic that the state says that's still optional. When many of, I mean, we have a great turnout of 4K, certainly 5K. So again, it's just a comment I make. I think it should be mandatory because of that window of opportunity when kids are starting, or are continuing to learn at their optimal time.
I'd be curious to know why they didn't do that. You know, why they didn't include those two.
Well, 5K probably because they never did.
Yeah?
It's really interesting.
And sometimes change is hard for some people.
Okay. 55-0.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, sorry.
5200.
Sorry.
Under the second heading, written excuse record, required, excuse me. So this has to be, just for clarification, it has to be in writing. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it could be an email, text, or, okay, thank you. Then under excused absences, under physical and mental condition, the second sentence, absences for this reason may be excused by oral or written notification to the attendance officer. So I do like the option where it can be verbal, where it doesn't have to be written. Like sometimes, you know, families may never get the written piece in, but they would just call in. And then I think the last, or maybe not the last comment, under J, election day official, our policy is including private schools and schools, students enrolled in home-based private education. Those are beyond our control. Why are they in our policy manual?
Yeah, and that is right out of state law. So that's right where that,
It doesn't make sense, because we don't have any control over that. It seems like it's connected with the public school education, but it's not. I would, my own bias is it should be a separate paragraph for homeschool and private education. But if that's right on the policy, we can't do anything about it.
well, I mean, you could separate it, I suppose.
Did we put it together, or was it separated, do we know, Aaron, at one time?
No, I don't, to my knowledge, we haven't changed
So
that.
they just added 4K, really, when 4K came into being. Because
Yeah.
5K has always been optional. So, okay, grade's definition of part of day for an excused absence. And they talk about 4K and 5 and 6 to 12. They talk about not in their assigned area for 20 minutes or more. Yeah, that's a 20-minute leeway for kids to come. As a former teacher and administrator, and now as a board member, I mean, I think those kids should be there on time, or certainly within 5 minutes.
I wonder when that changed,
I don't know.
that the expectation isn't to be there on time.
I don't know, but I think most teachers will say the first 10 or 15 minutes of the school day is just as important as the rest of the day, because it sort of sets the tone, the expectations. When kids come in late, you know, they can be disruptive. In addition to the teacher having to repeat themselves sometime to connect with that student.
So what you're doing, just to be very clear about this, is that you're talking about the difference between a tardy and an unexcused absence. So
I
when
get you. I get
you
you.
move from a tardy, I'm late, to you missed, now it's recorded as part of a day for truancy purposes. So a student is considered a habitual truant if they're have unexcused absences for part or all of a day for 5 days in a semester. So what this defines is says that 0 to 20 wouldn't count for habitual truancy. So if I'm, late to school for 15 minutes on 5 days in a semester, I'm not habitual truant. But if I'm 20 or more minutes late, then it counts. So it's the difference between like tardy or late to school and an unexcused absence. What it doesn't, because you can have an unexcused tardy,
Right.
but it's in no
Right, yeah.
way saying that it's okay. Students still have consequences for them, it's just not habitual truancy.
Good clarification.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have for that.
That's important. Okay, 5505, academic honesty.
Yes, I do have a comment about that. Under academic honesty, going down to E, talks about using language, translation work of someone else's, or using technology when the expectation is doing one's own translation. I think many students use technology as part of it. Are we talking about, what kind of technology are we talking about? AI? And if
That's how I
that's
interpreted it.
so,
I would
we should,
assume.
I think we should be more specific then to that.
The only reason I'm not sure I agree with that, because I'll tell you, it's always a catch-up game. And what is now the current, AI concern, you've got to give teachers, because when I was doing term papers, it was just like, what was within the legal, or what was within the ethical, and what was not. And it's just constantly changing.
Well,
So
and
I
I
think in a
think-
way you need a little leeway.
But I'm
And I
thinking-
think with this, with translation specifically, having a more open definition, because it could be, like Duolingo is an app that does translation or learn, you can learn.
Right.
And they might not be using it in the class, but a student might be using it, but I don't think that would be considered AI.
Yeah.
Or online translation services, Google Translate, but I don't think it would be AI either.
And I understand those ideas, but what about someone who's using technology to look up definitions of words? I mean, I always use technology to identify.
But it does say in here, with the teacher's permission, I mean, there is that worked into here, and I think you need to have it somewhat vague, but you're always going back to the teacher.
Yeah.
That's all I have
Okay.
for that one.
I think it's just general, I like seeing that there's some,
So do
that
I.
the addition here
Yes.
is really, because the last time we reviewed this was in March of
Mhm.
&24, and so really we're just reviewing
Yeah.
the AI.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that we're starting to see this incorporated, because
Mhm.
it's I mean,
Yes.
it is the new
Yes.
thing.
You have to learn to recognize it, for one thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. 5610, suspension and expulsion. 5771, search and seizure. 8510, wellness.
Yes.
Okay.
Under
That's,
A,
that's where you get it.
talks about promoting nutrition education with the objective of improving students' health. I don't think we can improve students' health, but we certainly can promote students' health. And that would be in more consistent language with C, where they talk about promoting student health down there.
What's the objective of improving students' health?
Mhm.
Is this
I don't know.
statutory also, I wonder?
There's definitely statute on this. I'd have to
Yeah.
look it up. There's federal law
This is the one we were
as
referring
well,
to.
but I can look that up and see.
I'm not,
How much flexibility?
I appreciate your attention to detail, because you're right, it's not, they are similar, so I feel like they should match.
I mean, that's likely based off of DPI's model wellness policy, but that doesn't mean you're required to
Yeah.
use that typically. It's just a model policy that they developed.
I was more familiar with the language of promoting something versus
Yeah.
improving something.
Because we're
I
probably
certainly
not
can
doing
look.
much measuring.
No.
Look that up.
Yeah, okay. Good catch.
Okay.
That's it.
8540, vending machines. I remember the hubbub when they took the soda out.
Oh, yes.
A few years back. 8550, competitive food sales. 5460.03, WEVA high school graduation requirements.
Oh, wait. Oh, we have to vote on the,
I think they're all.
no, that's
one.
right.
They're all-
in
together.
one.
Yeah.
They're all together, sorry.
Yeah,
For the WEVA one, for the
Mhm.
graduation requirements, I think, just to clarify, this, changing the credits, this is really just to align what they've been practicing for, the last year?
It's to align to the statute that
Yeah.
requires
Oh.
financial literacy.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So they're clarifying
yeah,
that
okay.
in their policy.
okay. 5460.04, Destination Career Academy high school graduation requirements. Okay,
Oh, this was actually, sorry, that comment was actually for this one, about on the first page, earning a minimum of 18 and changing it to 15
Yeah,
credits.
we already had changed that to
Yeah.
15, so.
That's what I thought, okay.
Yes.
Really, that change was made at our
Right.
last review.
Yeah, okay.
back in March, I think.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify.
5460.05, Insight School of Wisconsin High School graduation requirements. All right. Any further discussion before we vote? I've got a motion from Megan and a second from Tom. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next is action on recommended WEVA Destination Career Academy and Insight School of Wisconsin Statute 118.408G, student transfers to resident districts. Do I have a motion to approve? Could I?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Megan. Discussion.
No, just please note, there, of these 11, one is a second grader, one is a fifth grader.
Yep.
The
So
rest are
we're
high
sending
school.
them they're going back to their school districts probably with little to no support, but I certainly understand the rationale.
Yeah. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And that is it for our action items. Informational items, the first one is the school safety written drill evaluation notification and review per Wisconsin State Statute 118.07-4CP.
Okay, so you can see that in there, just an evacuation exercise at Wabisa.
I thought it was interesting, at the conclusion of that situation, where the fire chief requested that Brooke report to him directly to make sure that, her confirmation that all the students were accounted for. He wanted a face-to-face, short conversation.
Yeah, and we are meeting with the fire department at our next A-council meeting just to discuss how to handle it when we do have false alarms. And so they don't have to send out as many people.
It was amazing, too, that they were saying, this isn't something you practice. You would never have a practice in the middle of lunch, but they said it worked out. And kind of kudos to the administration for being able to make just a little bit of adjustment in the schedule. And everything went right back to normal. That's pretty awesome.
This, I don't really expect anyone to know the real answer, but, I mean, do we get very many false alarms?
We've had 2 so far this year,
Oh, so.
which is the most
Yeah, I was
in the
gonna
last
say.
3 years.
Oh, okay.
As
So
in
generally not
Last
very
year, I think
many.
we had 1, from what I remember.
Okay.
That was here.
And I'm trying to think, are they all covered with that plastic cover?
I think so.
There was like a first grader that pulled the alarm years ago in Conradelvia. That resulted in the fire department covering all those fire alarms.
And it used to have a fairly significant cost attached to it as well. And it's not something you want to make a habit out of.
No, we don't encourage it.
Wise.
Understatement.
Okay, the annual K-12 Stride Summit. Mr. Mooney, the floor is yours.
Sure, thanks, Greg. That was conducted last week for a couple of days. The motto this year was delivering tomorrow's education today. A strong motto. They talked about the last 25 years. This is the 25th year of K-12. And they're talking about the next 25 years already. They talk about virtual learning is affordable and accessible to anyone, anywhere, anytime. Their goal is to personalize the education to everyone, every student's needs. There have been 3 million learners and 3 million learning coaches. Each parent is considered a learning coach, and they receive training with that also. They've had 22,000 teachers in 35 states and 100,000 high school graduates in those 25 years. They talked about TI, which is teaching intelligence, combine that with AI, and you have the best combination for kids.
That only makes sense.
Yes, it does. They talk about Strider squads. It's forming small communities with geographically located families. Parent squads, the same way, parent advisory councils. Facilitating the communities with play dates, pizza parties, clubs, book clubs, etc. Making connections to build communities. And it's really fascinating how they transform a simulated playground. And different groups, different students can form different friend groups and actually engage in some things in playground. They have passing time in the hallway where friends can connect. It's just phenomenal how things have changed with virtual learning over the past few years. There are 4 sectionals. The first is marketing and public relations synergy, which I'll bypass a little. Unlocking potential, evolving the science of reading. That was heavy duty. I think we'll hear more about we're doing here in the district here. After 25 years of research, the science of reading has surfaced. They talk about the big five, the phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary comprehension, and fluency. And I shared with you that last year, and they reiterated it this year, that Stride has a guarantee that if a student isn't reading at grade level by grade 3, they will tutor those students until they reach grade level reading. That's right, phenomenal. In our district, we provide a lot of interventions, which is, just as good, I think.
This is all virtual?
It's all virtual. And then they have the K-12 zone. It's where they have innovative engagement for teachers and students. And talking about unlocking the barricades to promote establishing more social relationships between students and teachers and among those groups also. And it's just amazing what they're doing using that type of technology. All the safety things are in place. Security is in place, so it's not like people can break into those walls and start doing things. I talked about this last year also, online counseling services for both students and families. And then finally, just surrounding the virtual students with that sense of community, just like a regular school. You have your homeroom groups, you have your reading groups and that, and that's one of their big goals. And then they talked about special programs, educational support and engagement with students who are visually and hearing impaired. It's just phenomenal. And it's interesting because, they have IEPs, so that means, some students are required to be one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Right.
quite an expensive venture, and also a puzzle trying to figure out the timing for all that to take place. So, and we've also won an award. Sarah Cutler was presented with an award for Destinations Career Academy, and the fine work that they've done with that school. And that concludes that report.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions or comments before we move on? Next, forward exam data, annual reading report, and Act 20 update. Melissa Fold joins us this evening. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Nice, you're walking.
So the forward exam, before I dive into that information, the forward exam scores were re-normed this year, which means a group of educators from around the state got together and looked at the forward exam items and responses and decided what proficient looks like or what meeting standards looks like, and that changed the bar, which means we can't really compare the scores from this spring, this most recent spring, to the springs before that. It's kind of a fresh slate starting over. However, we can look at how we compared to the state, because last year compared to the state, that gap And this year compared to the state, that gap, it's the same benchmark both times. So this graph I've shared many times before. I like to call it the rainbow chart. It has cohorts highlighted as you go across. So for example, the students who were in 3rd grade in the spring of 2023 in blue will become the 4th graders in the spring of 2024, and you can follow diagonally down. So you'll notice the far right, the spring of 2024, many more students are meeting or exceeding the standard, but again, that's that cut score change. So yes, we think our students grew significantly. Yes, we think we're doing great things in our literacy classes, but that doesn't completely account for the fact that last year the scores were kind of in the high 40s, low 50s, and this year we're up into the 60s and high 60s. That's that cut score change. However, if you look at, again, those blue students who were 3rd graders and then 4th graders, they were 8.9% above the state, and now they're 10.3% above the state. So in addition to the growth we saw from the cut scores, we also saw some nice growth for students compared to the state. As you look down, pretty much every cohort grew in their margin compared to the state. That group that was 5th and 6th graders in yellow went down just a little bit, basically the same, a little bit lower. That group from 6th to 7th grade is one that we're going to dive into a little bit more. Why did it go from 12 points above the state to 6 points above the state? We're kind of looking at what are some things we can work on there. But a really great highlight is the group that is, they're currently freshmen in high school. When they were 7th graders, they were 5% above the state, and as 8th graders, they were 17% above the state. And that growth for 8th graders, yes, it certainly reflects the amazing things that are happening in 8th grade, but it's a culmination of everything that's happened K through 8 leading up to that point and getting them to be in a great place heading into high school. You can also notice our ranks in Dane County. And again, even though the cut scores changed, that's something that we can take a look at. And our ranks in Dane County were either steady pretty much, or there was a nice jump for the students who were 3rd graders to 4th grade. They went from 8th in the county to 4th. And again, that group that was in 7th grade to 8th grade went from 7th in the county to 3rd. So that was some excellent progress there for those two groups. The other groups, you know, a couple slipped one spot, but pretty steady performance overall on the forward exam. Megan C. asked for this chart, and so it's here now. This is a new way of looking at our forward exam, information that we just haven't used previously, so I can orient you to that. McFarland is there on the left, and that graph is showing McFarland without WEVA, separated. And the lighter blue is our percent of students proficient and advanced in ELA. The darker blue is in math. And then you can see how that compares to every other district in the county. And those other districts are sorted kind of highest to lowest. And this is all of 3rd through 8th grade combined. So the rainbow graph that I shared with you was each cohort separately. This is all of those students from all of 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade combined. And so you can see we're doing quite well. One thing of note that I thought was pretty interesting is if we currently on that graph, our ELA we're 7th in the county, and in math we're 5th in the county, but it is very, very close. The number turned out to be 21 students. If we had 21 more students be proficient in ELA, we would have gone from 7th to 3rd. And if we had 21, it just turned out to be 21 again, 21 more students in math be proficient, we would have gone from 5th to 2nd. So our scores there are just right in line, right up there with the top of the county for all of the schools. And it's something, obviously, we want to grow, but we're doing very well, and we're headed in a great direction with ELA.
Thank you so much for putting this together. I'm a very visual person, and so if you could have seen me at home digging through the cohorts and like drawing lines and whatnot. But during this whole referendum passing process, I should say, we did get a lot of questions of, well, where do we stand in terms of other schools within our district, or within our county, I should say. And so seeing this in all the colors is extremely helpful. So thank you.
You're welcome. And it's bookended there on the far right side with the statewide. So we're well above the state in both ELA and math. Not to just focus on our 3rd through 8th grade students, ACT and pre-ACT results are also there for ELA. Some nice growth again for our high school students in ELA. It is an interesting thing that the high school has noticed over time, that when those cohorts go from 9th grade to 10th grade to 11th grade, we don't see the growth in the percent of students being proficient that we really would like to see. We have a lot of wonderings about that. Are our juniors doing their very best effort on the ACT? Some of them are saying, I take the ACT another time, I'm already happy with my score, am I giving my best effort? But in terms of rank in the county, that's probably not unique to McFarland. Probably all of the juniors across the county and across the state are also wrestling with those same motivational issues, and we end up typically about 6th in the county, which is okay, but something we want to see improve. Very pleased with last year's juniors, our current senior class. That was the highest amount above the state that we've been in some time for the ELA, 12.8% above the state in terms of number of students proficient and advanced. And the cut scores didn't change there, so you can compare the ACT scores going backwards. All right. Some updates from each building. I'm going to share just a bit of information about each of the buildings. The principals will follow up and fill in some of the gaps. But at Conrad Elvium, they are working to apply what they learned about the science of learning through their letters training over the last 2 years to our Wonders curriculum. Wonders is a fantastic curriculum. We're very happy with it, but there are pieces that we think don't align with what we learned in letters that we want to modify, and we want to make sure that it is really doing everything that we possibly can to get students off to a great, strong start with their literacy knowledge. Wonders or letters? Wonders, this is only the 2nd year of implementation.
Yeah.
So the teachers are now finally seeing things they did last year and thinking, oh, I remember, this is what went well last year. This is how I can make that go better this year. These are pieces we need to change. Last year, it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. The first year you implement a comprehensive curriculum and it's just getting through it. This year, they're really refining that process. Act 20 that I'll talk about quite a bit in a little bit is pretty comprehensive. It takes quite a bit of attention and focus, particularly for our interventionists, but also our homeroom teachers. Our homeroom teachers are providing intervention to students who are not quite there yet with their reading proficiency. And they're using a program from the University of Florida, that's UFly, so the UF there is University of Florida. It's a literacy intervention program that focuses on phonics, and it gives explicit systematic instruction, and we have a great program for identifying where students' gaps are and then starting them exactly on that lesson and having teachers implement that for small groups or one-on-one with students in their classroom. And that's an excellent change that we've made this year to make that much easier for teachers to implement. We're giving them the curriculum. Greg purchased all of that and provided professional development time for teachers to be able to do that in their classrooms. Wabisa, similar. The Wabisa teachers, Act 20 goes up to 3rd grade, so our 3rd grade teachers also participated in letters training. Our 4th and 5th grade teachers, unfortunately, letters is quite expensive, and so for 4th and 5th grade teachers, we provided them access to a different science of reading training over the summer, and what they're going to work on this year is taking what they learned over the summer and applying that to their curriculum. Their big focus and change this year is increasing the amount of time they use on our supplemental phonics core curriculum. That was something we started last year. We had noticed our word study, spelling, vocabulary as a weakness in our current curriculum. And so we added on this 95% phonics core program. And last year when we implemented, we knew we weren't allowing the right amount of time for them to be able to do the entire curriculum. And this year we've doubled the amount of time, which it's not doubling the amount of time that they have to teach literacy, it's just doubling how we're splitting up that portion of time. So if you increase the amount of time on vocabulary and spelling, you have to decrease the amount of time on reading and writing, but it's a need that we have, and it's a temporary change in how we're splitting up the time. We'll see how that goes and then move forward. We're hoping we can close some gaps. We're also knowing that the students we'll get from CEPS are going to be that much stronger in their phonics knowledge, so we feel this is just a short-term change while we're waiting for all of the great things that we're getting from CEPS to kind of trickle their way up. Similarly, the middle school started using an online program called IXL last year, and they've really redoubled and focused their efforts with IXL this year. When it was new last year, it was teachers experimenting, pulling bits and pieces, and trying to figure out what would fit best for their students. This year, we have a comprehensive scope and sequence, really focused on grammar and language. And again, that's an area where our current curriculum is lacking, and so they've really focused on that. Students can do grammar lessons independently, and it's adaptive based on which questions they get correct and which standards they need to learn. But also teachers do something called, I love the name, a group jam, where all of them are doing the same lesson together. And again, it's very explicit instruction, and the teachers didn't have to develop that. We just bought the IXL program so that they didn't spend their time doing that, but they could really focus on spending their time implementing it. The middle school I didn't write up there, but similar to the high school where I'll highlight it, the middle school and high school are working on disciplinary literacy across the building. The high school is focusing on a universal summarizing strategy that started with the teachers of 9th grade students, and those teachers said, we should just be doing this across the entire building. So they spent time professional development, learning a common strategy. And when Erin Fisher presented that information, she's our literacy coordinator, she said, now I'm teaching you a new strategy, so I'm going to do this with a familiar text so that you can really be focusing on the strategy and learn that. Well, if the entire staff is going to use the same strategy with students, whether they're in math or science or social studies, if they don't have to keep learning another strategy, if they use the same one every time, they're going to be able to really focus on the content as they're learning it and focus on how can they summarize what they've learned and how can they then retain it and apply it to other contexts. The other piece that the high school will continue this year that started last year was the English and social studies departments got together to talk about how they teach writing. They both do a similar process where they're talking about really what I would call claim, evidence, and reasoning, how they structure their paragraphs and structure their arguments. But in social studies, they use an acronym called HAPPY, and in English, they use an acronym called SOAPSTONE. When they got together, and those things, I cannot tell you off the top of my head what either of them stand for, but I know it has to do with author's perspective and what the author is trying to accomplish and your evidence pieces that go along the way. When they met, they decided it's okay that we're using different acronyms, but we need to make a graphic organizer so that students know how they fit together. So in all of the English and social studies classrooms, they have the same posters, pardon me, that connect those two acronyms together. Excuse me. So they'll continue that work this year, and it's just making those intentional connections for students so that they're not trying to figure out what the teacher means. They can see, okay, it's a different acronym because it has a different purpose. It's different when you're writing like a historian compared to when you're writing for a literary purpose. That is so much more than one slide worth of content for the teachers. It is meant to be a general overview of the great work that's going on, but we are really laser focused on literacy across all of K-12, and we're seeing that pay off for students both inside the classroom and then eventually on our standardized test results. So to close, updates about Act 20. I did not change the date on that, which I'm going to say was intentional. This was a recycled presentation that we gave to teachers back in December, and then we gave them another version of this same presentation in August, and now here it is for you in November. Excuse me. In the report that I gave you, there were several pages about Act 20 and a table that had what does it say, what's the requirement for Act 20, and then what is McFarland's plan. All of that information is available on our website. So I am not going to read all of that or go into much detail about every part, but if there's anyone in the community who wonders how is McFarland implementing Act 20, if you go to the Teaching and Learning webpage, you can find this Early Literacy Wisconsin Act 20 page that has all of the information that I gave to the board in the report. Act 20 contains a lot of information that includes how DPI is organized, how funding is provided for literacy, teacher preparation and licensing, professional development for teachers and pre-service teachers, as well as curriculum, instruction, and assessment. I'm going to focus on really 3 parts: the professional development, curriculum, and assessment pieces, and then just kind of nod at the everything else portion of Act 20. Act 20 asks that all K-3 teachers, including special education teachers, interventionists, reading specialists, and administrators, receive professional development on science-based reading instruction through DPI-approved curriculum methods. The great thing is, we had started that before Act 20 was passed. Letters is one of the approved trainings for Act 20, and at this point, 99% of our K-3 staff have completed letters. Our CEPS staff were working on that over the last 2 years, and our 3rd grade staff did that this summer. Just a couple teachers that we need to catch, their schedules didn't work out, and so we'll have a new cohort next summer to catch up either any new hires or the teachers who weren't able to make the sessions this summer. Our original plan was to open up letters for 4th and 5th grade teachers as well, because we know it's really valuable and it will help them reach the students who are falling behind. Due to the referendum not passing, we weren't able to afford to have 4th and 5th grade teachers participate in letters, but there is a free online program that has similar content at a much less intense depth, I would say. So similar information, just less intensity, and we had 14 staff complete
Do you believe it's
that.
adequate?
Yes, for 4th and 5th grade teachers, because it really talks about like letter names and sounds, and by 4th grade, that's information most of our 4th and 5th grade teachers have. What our teachers have said is, it does help me though for the students who are below grade level. It gives me some more strategies about going backwards and filling in the holes. But I would say our 4th and up teachers don't need quite the same intensity that our kindergarten teachers do, who are really living and breathing the early literacy skills every day. Curriculum. Act 20 says that K-3 reading curriculum must be science-based in both the universal and intervention settings. And it defines science-based instruction to be systematic and explicit for phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, building background knowledge, oral language development, vocabulary building, instruction in writing, and comprehension, as well as reading fluency. Act 20 also specifies that instruction cannot include 3Qing or MSV. That is a way of teaching reading where you're not necessarily decoding and looking all of the letter parts and sounds, but you're looking at other hints that you have, like context in the whole sentence, and looking at a picture on the page, for example. The state is saying we want people to decode the words as they're written without using those other meaning clues. So our current status, Wonders, is a science-based comprehensive reading program. We also supplement that with Haggerty for some more phonemic awareness at K2. We've also looked through the units of study for 3rd grade and said, yes, there are some pieces of units of study that we wish were more systematic and explicit, so let's add on that 95% core phonics word study program and increase the time this year to make sure that we're aligned with the Act 20 requirements. Our interventions, UFly, I mentioned previously, we're really ramping up our use of that at K2. The 95% group and Sunday intervention systems are again pieces that we had in place all prior to Act 20. So all of this work that McFarland has done to comply with Act 20 was started prior to, because we know the importance of the science of reading, and talking to colleagues in other districts who are a year behind us or a year different from us in their implementation, it is so nice that we were on top of things and proactive, because the reactive side doesn't feel quite as good. Now, assessment, we didn't have any choice, and we were a little reactive in assessment. DPI, this was back from December, it said, we'll select an assessment that we'll give 2 times a year for 4K and 3 times a year for K3. And then based on the results of those assessments, some students will also take diagnostic assessments to dig in deeper. DPI selected that assessment on July 15th this summer. And originally, the implementation was supposed to be for this fall. They passed a supplemental bill, I guess, that said you don't actually need to begin that assessment until winter. However, for people who work in schools, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to use one assessment in the fall and then switch things over mid-year. So we just did the new assessment starting in the fall. That is Ames Web Plus, and Really kudos to our school psychs, Becca Hulse and Kayla Gowitz, as well as our literacy coordinator, Lori Lovell, for all of the organization that they put into figuring out what the assessment is, figuring out training for teachers, managing the results process, looking at which students needed more diagnostic assessments to follow up, organizing all of that data. It was an enormous amount of work that we couldn't even begin working on until after July 15th when the assessment was chosen, and they got it done. We've assessed all of our students for K through 3 this fall, even though it wasn't required. And as we look at it, I'm gonna skip a slide and then come back. So we tested students at K through 3, and the students who score below the 25th percentile by Act 20 need to receive a diagnostic assessment, which is just a more detailed assessment that goes into a specific area so that we can figure out where is the student's understanding of literacy breaking down. So we start with oral fluency test where it's listening to them read and seeing how many words per minute, but then we break that down and go backwards. Well, is it letter sounds that they're having trouble with? No, they get the letter sounds. Well, okay, is it letter names that they're having trouble? Is it nonsense words? Which part of the literacy process are they struggling with so that we can target our intervention to where they're struggling? In a healthy system, we would really love to have 80% or more of our students scoring above the 25th percentile. And as you can see there, we weren't quite there this fall. However, when we have those number of students who needed that diagnostic assessment, when we gave the first diagnostic assessment, about half of the students scored much better on the diagnostic than on the screener. And so our wondering is, were they just not familiar with that type of assessment? And so when they got another chance at a very similar assessment measuring a very similar thing and they did better, it's not that they have trouble reading, it's that they have trouble taking that assessment. So when we get to the winter, we're hoping and expecting to see a higher percentage of our students above the 25th percentile. We're also going to give them a practice test right before they have the actual test in the winter. That was a reason we wanted to start earlier than the state requirement so that we could learn things like that and just have a smoother experience in the winter. Starting in the winter, then all of the students that are in that below 25th percentile and get the diagnostic will have a personal reading plan that is shared with families and is monitored weekly for the rest of the year. That plan will have, this is the program we're going to use, and this is what we're going to be looking for to say that your student is back on track and is ready to just have their regular classroom instruction again and be caught up with their peers and ready to go. I think the only thing I skipped a little bit on this is just an FYI, we're still using FastBridge. I did have a parent reach out to me asking, why are you using AimsWeb and FastBridge? Why are you assessing our kids so much? We're using the state required program for literacy at K through 3. We're using what we always used to use for math at K through 8. And then 4th grade, we're using what the state requires us to do one thing, so we're doing what the state requires us to do, but we left everything else alone at the other grades because changing everything all at once on very little notice would have been logistically complicated, so we just changed the bare minimum. We'll evaluate this year. We may change over to something else next year, we may not, but we didn't want to make that decision on 1 month's notice and with no teacher input because they weren't working over the summer. I believe, everything else. So everything else about Act 20. Act 20 also gets into what resources we use for intervention, who gets it, how it's communicated by families. One piece that'll be of interest to the board is there is a promotion component of Act 20 that talks about how students move from 4th to 5th grade, I believe. DPI will release a model policy change, and then the board will decide if they want to update our current promotion policy and use the model policy or how we want to approach that. Act 20, I labeled it DPI stuff. It created a new office in DPI and some committees. Currently, because of funding, that office at DPI is one person, Barb Novak, and she is in charge statewide of helping support districts and figure out the implementation. There are supposed to be some literacy coaches statewide, but again, due to funding, there aren't any at this point. So it is just a one-person department who is doing really a phenomenal job, given the constraints she has, to provide information to districts.
Are there a lot of statutory requirements that, are intermixed that need to be addressed?
Yes. Like that assessment piece is all a statutory requirement. How we communicate with families is a statutory requirement.
Okay.
The last piece that felt pertinent was reporting. Currently at K2, when we get our school report cards out, they use an alternate reporting because they don't take the forward exam at K2. Going forward, all of these required assessments that I was talking about, that information, the percent of students who are proficient by third grade will end up on the school report card in a public and visible place so that families know how we're doing in literacy. And again, that's something we've been sharing with families right along. So we didn't wait for the state to tell us that these are all good ideas. And it has been still a difficult road to go through all of the technical details of getting up to speed with Act 20. But philosophically, we were already on that path, and that has made the process much easier for us. That concludes my reading report for today. What questions can I help address related to literacy and reading in McFarland?
It certainly appears as though we're trending in the good direction.
Yes.
From the time, I don't even know how many years ago it was now, but literacy was a very difficult thing for us to get our hands around. And it certainly seems like everything's headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
Kudos to those that are probably doing 2-3 jobs at once. But our staff does that. So, thank you.
Yeah, I certainly applaud the leadership and the teaching to help get the students where they are. But I think I would be remiss to say that based on the literacy approaches we used previously, I mean, the late 80s, early 90s, we were not performing well at all. But then we went up significantly. So I think we want to acknowledge that also. But a couple things. I know you had talked about some of the PD wasn't done this summer because of funding. Yeah. I believe curriculum instruction is one of the most important things that we should provide to our teachers, regardless of the funding. We should find the money to do it. Secondly, the materials also. I don't think we should let the lack of funding result in not purchasing the needed materials. I think, we just take a look at our overall budget and see where we can find that funding. Because otherwise, it just delays us further in helping students. Yeah, some of them fall either further behind. So I think if that happens again, I think you come to the board and say, this is the plan. Can we move forward with it somehow? We shouldn't use the lack of funding as an excuse not to move forward with that at a good accelerated rate.
Thank you. And the alternate PD that we provided for 4th and up teachers was recommended by CISA. And for that second point that you mentioned, they said, we recommend districts use their money for the materials over the professional development and do this free professional development that literacy professionals at CISA 6, which is a leader in literacy in the state, they said, this is adequate. Spend your money on getting the materials in the hands of teachers so that the kids can have that high quality instructional material.
And I appreciate you collaborating with CISA 6 because they provide some wonderful resources.
Absolutely.
The only other comment I would make is that when 4K was initiated a few years ago, the fear was that the kindergarten curriculum would come down to the 4K curriculum. First grade curriculum would come down to 5K curriculum. Some of that has occurred. It reinforces my belief when I hear Act 20 is saying we must test 4K students. To me, that's totally inappropriate. It's not developmentally appropriate. The original intent of 4K was to get kids ready for their 5K experience. Yeah, it just tears my heart out when kids come into 4K or 5K and we classify them as already behind and we do interventions with them. they're developing right where they should be. We have to give them time. And as an institution, it's nationwide, we don't provide that time for some of the kids. They all learn at different rates, and we all know that. So let's give them some of that time. But I'll get off my,
No, it is
Soapbox
nice
now.
that the intervention components of Act 20 don't go down to 4K. So that, we have to assess them, and it's really letter sounds at 4K.
Yeah.
So what sound does this letter make, which is, information that 4K is working on. It is developmental. But that sharing to family, we have to share that to families, and in some cases, it does alarm families. What are you saying? My child's already behind. And our 4K teachers do a nice job of saying, that's why they're here. If they already knew it, they'd be in kindergarten already. They're in 4K to learn that information, and we're gonna keep working at it, and by the end of 4K, they're gonna be ready.
yeah.
Anybody have anything else?
The only other question I have is, you talked about spelling, and that historically speaking has been sort of a thorn on our side. Have you found anything that can improve the spelling competency and proficiency of kids?
I think, yes and no. There's still an aspect of we want them to develop those writing skills and those broader thinking skills, and it's difficult for students who are just learning to focus on spelling every word accurately and doing that broader thinking and organizing their thought skills. However, the information we learned in letters, the S in letters is spelling. And so it's talking about how do we learn those letter names and sounds, how do we figure out, and as they're learning to read, they're splitting the words into their component sounds. And so then that's the decoding. So then when you go to encode the information, you know how that works. You know how these sounds fit together, these sounds match with letters, and you can put the words back together again. So I think more intentional focus on the letter sounds and how words work will help their spelling down the line. The program we're using at 3rd through 5th grade does a nice job of, then at that point, they're talking about roots and Greek and Latin roots, and how does this part of the word work together, and taking longer multisyllabic words and breaking them apart and putting them back together. So are we improving our spelling? Yes. And it'll still be a part to go. When we had last year, we just started in 3rd grade with that new program. They didn't have, at K2, they didn't have wonders yet coming up to them. And so we're throwing them into our controlled vowels, and they're like, what's an ARD controlled vowel? What's an open syllable? What's a closed syllable? And now the 3rd grade teachers are like, oh, open syllable, closed syllable, like they have the hand signals, they have a sense of what it means. I was blown away when my daughter, I think she was in 1st grade or 2nd grade, and she said, she was trying to spell something, maybe foil, and she said, oi. Like, what says oi? And I was like, I don't know, what do you think? And she said, OY and OI can both say oi. Which one is it? And I was like, oh, they do. And she, oh, wait, OY is usually at the end of a word, and OI is usually in the middle of the word, so I bet it's OI. And I was like, it is OI in the middle of the word. And just for her to, say all of those, know how it goes, know what the letters are, I was like, oh, this is working. What we're doing is definitely starting to pay off for kids.
The only reason I bring it up is that I continuously hear that from employers sometimes.
Yeah.
But one thing I don't hear from employers is that the kids who are in the youth apprenticeship program, I don't hear any of that from those kids that are engaged in a specific company or business. Biggest part of that's the whole mentoring thing by the employer.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
thanks for everything you do.
Always thorough. Thank you. I could understand it. What do we do from here?
We have the school improvement presentation, so we've
Who's
just got
gonna go
about
first?
another hour and a half left. So we're gonna have our principals come on up, and I'm
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
orient you to our next part, our final part of our agenda here. So I know you received information in advance, but we're gonna walk through this for you. We sent you a document that includes acronyms that we may be referencing. for your purposes. Ultimately, what you're going to hear is the school improvement plans, both that are connected across the district and things that are unique to each individual building. Because we're driven by our strategic plan and our mission and vision, our mission accord is meeting the needs of every learner every day, and our vision of creating an equitable and inclusive community committed to student belonging, achievement, and growth. You will hear that embedded in all of the work that we discuss with you tonight. The way that we will present this to show that alignment with the with the strategic plan is each school improvement plan is divided into those 4 pillars of our strategic plan. So we'll take each area, each pillar one at a time. I will share with you some of the practices that cut across the district that we're all doing to show you that connection and district-wide work. And then each building will highlight a practice in more detail. And what we're trying to do so that it's not redundant and repetitive for you is the principals will be sharing some different things, but many of those are being done in all the buildings. So instead of each building say, yeah, we do that too, yeah, we do that too, yeah, we do that too, you'll hear it highlighted. So make the assumption that they're also doing that in their unique ways. I ask that you hold your questions until after each building has shared about that pillar, and then we'll have questions before moving on to the next pillar. I will also, in addition to sharing the practices, I will also be sharing our performance related to our key performance indicators, or our KPIs, to throw out an acronym for you.
I love a good KPI.
Yeah, love a good KPI, and we've got them. So I will share our progress on those because that's what we've defined for our strategic plan. So with that, one of the things that you will see that I have for you is we do have a slideshow, which is a unique slideshow in the sense that it really doesn't have any words. So outside of our first slide, which is our mission, each of the pillars will have a different slide that highlights some things, just to foreshadow, some things about some visuals to exemplify that pillar, but there aren't words for you to stare at because you're going to stare at these fine people that have words of wisdom and insight to share with you related to their school improvement plan. With that, I'm going to start with educational excellence. That is our first pillar to share with you. The objective in this area is improving academic achievement with a focus on literacy. I think you know a little bit about that, and closing gaps for traditionally underserved groups. Again, this was an objective developed through the strategic plan process, not something we came up with on our own. And you'll see that in our school learning objectives are really focused on this area, and literacy being our main priority. In terms of our key performance indicators, it's really about reducing those gaps between groups related to race, disability, and gender. And you'll see that in general, when you include ACT and forward exam, where we saw pretty much a stable, the gap pretty much stayed stable across areas. The one area that we're really focusing on in our work is the gap between students with and without disabilities, because that one increased by 3 percentage points. So that's a real focus of our work this year. We also, in this area, we also use the school perceptions student survey, the connection index. And what that measures is students' sense of belonging at school because they have healthy relationships with other students and adults, and they're actively involved in school-related activities. So that school perception survey takes several questions on that survey and combines it into one connection index on that survey. We don't have last year was our baseline. So in January of this year, we'll have a comparable. So we don't have a comparable to share. In terms of our district-aligned work, just getting to that, working on those gaps, it's really about addressing a focus on high-quality instruction and services. You often hear about that referred to as part of our Equitable Multi-Level Systems of Support, or EMLSS. And a big part of that, kind of one of the new things that we're doing this year, is initiating collaborative classroom visits. The high school took the lead on this last year, piloted this, and this is really about teachers just spending time in one another's classrooms, observing and learning from the expertise of their colleagues, and then sharing those insights out that they learn. Also, you heard a lot about Act 20 and what that means in the literacy work. We're also added the curriculum councils back in, a reminder about that. So those have met a couple times already this year. We continue to implement some of the plans that we developed last year. So the progressive response to behavior, the bullying harassment plan, attendance plan. We're not going to focus on those tonight because that was really a focus of last year. We continue to refine those. I just didn't want you to forget those. We're hoping they will become standard operating procedure moving forward. So that just lays out a little bit of it, and we are going to hear a little bit from the buildings, then we'll have time for your questions. We're going to start with Conrad LVM Primary School and Mr. Greg Nelson.
Good evening. Nice to see everybody. All right, when it comes to educational excellence at CEPS this year, one thing I'd like to highlight is the fact that after going through letters training, and adopting the Wonders curriculum, we can give teachers the tool of a great curriculum, which is Wonders, but the real magic and the real teaching happens when, we have good teachers who have those skills teaching, the curriculum. That's the important work. But how do you connect it? That was what was on our mind starting this year. How do we connect the learning to the tool we have? We actually came across the perfect opportunity to do that learning and have that conversation. We have a group of teachers, we're calling them the Literacy Committee this year, that is going through a training with one of the CISAs on early literacy in an EMLSS with the focus on high quality instruction. So it really was perfect timing. It came our way, and it's doing that connecting for us. The outcome is we're going to have a group of teachers who are kind of trained on several high-quality instructional practices that we can then talk about bringing back to our school. And so those high-quality instructional practices that we're going to be trained on are teacher modeling, which is perfect. That's exactly what a structured, comprehensive curriculum entails, and student-led discussion. And so we are kind of in the midst of the teacher modeling training right now. We've defined teacher modeling as a group that we're going to then share with the staff, and we're going to think about how we can both affirm the good teacher modeling that's already happening, help everybody get on the same page with the definition as we work towards consistency in what that high-quality instructional practice means, looks like in the classroom, so that we can, again, continue the learning and supporting each other with it. So it was kind of exciting, again, that opportunity came our way, because it's doing what we were hoping to do ourselves, but providing the people who are experts in the field already to help guide us through it.
As Aaron mentioned, we have begun our CCVs, the Collaborative Classroom Visits, and very excited to report that our teachers are finding, they've talked about wanting to do that, and so we're hoping to, build a system. Thank you to the high school for, beginning that work, and just getting some positive feedback from their colleagues is always very affirming. Melissa had mentioned before, talked about our phonics instruction, and so this year it's really neat to see those systems that were developed. I think anytime you start something in year one, you're just kind of working out the tweaking things. So to have kids now know, like, oh, these are the routines of a lesson. So yes, we're adding more time, but we're just being much more efficient with it, and we have some foundational systems and practices and routines that kids are used to. The other thing we're looking at, and you hear about EMLSS, and we have, of course, the academic side. We've heard a lot about literacy tonight, but there's the social emotional learning side of that, and so we're really trying to be strategic this year about looking at some of our foundational SEL practices, our Tier 1 practices, and throughout the year doing some teaching, reteaching with our staff. So just recently at a PD day, we went over some of our regulation calming corners within the classroom to really help students, be self-aware? How can they advocate for themselves and take care of those regulation needs in the classroom instead of having to leave the classroom for that, so they're not missing out on instruction. And we're going to continue with further other opportunities as well. And yeah, I think that about hits it for Wabisa. Over to middle school.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit from the Indian Mound perspective. Lots of things, as Aaron said, are very similar, so I'm not going to repeat everything, but we do also have an EMLSS team in place that not only is there the building-wide one that everybody has, there's also going to be the district-wide one that Melissa has been talking about, but we're working on those CCVs as well. We are also digging into our process to determine students who are eligible for intervention and looking at progress monitoring and kind of fine-tuning that process. We are also really working to utilize our data to guide our practice. So we get data from lots of different places. You've heard about a lot of them tonight. We do have a program called Next Path, which is a district-wide program that replaced EduClimber, if you've heard of that. It's basically a hub that has all sorts of things, all sorts of data in it, and we're using it to help us guide our interventions. We are using our grades from standards-based grading, IXL, which Melissa talked about, our FAST Bridge, and our formative and summative assessments. The good thing right now, I think, at Indian Mound is we don't have any brand new curriculum. Therefore, we have the opportunity to spend some more time really looking at how we're assessing students, how it relates to their learning outcomes and the standards. So we have some time to kind of roll up our sleeves and dig into that by using the data that we're collecting. And then finally, the last thing is around student engagement. Two things I want to highlight there. One is the web program, which you've heard about before, but it's where everyone belongs. It's where the 6th graders come on the first day of school, and the 8th graders are their mentors, and there's times they meet throughout the year, which has been really outstanding for not only our 6th graders, but also for our 8th graders to be leaders. And then for positive behavior interventions and supports, PBIS, at Indian Mound, we kind of have a reset this year where we're kind of going back to basics. We know that in elementary school, students get taught behaviors all the time. And when you get to middle school, sometimes it's assumed that they should know or remember the things that they're taught about walking in the hallway and going through the lunch line and just very simple things. And we're learning that we do need to continue to teach our middle schoolers those things, even when we think they might already know them. So we're really going back to basics. We have signage around, we have common language, we're reteaching expectations, and it has been extremely successful in helping just the flow and the systems of our school from day to day.
All right, from the high school side of things, again, I know everyone's brought up the CCVs. That is something that the high school is now doing building wide. So we've got all of our staff getting to each other's classrooms, not only within their own department, but then interdepartment as well. We've got a lot of really solid feedback from that. So excited to kind of wrap up our first round of that here in the first semester and then dive into a second round of those in our spring semester. One kind of unique thing that we've put some effort into at the high school is some unifying of our PLC and department collaboration time. A lot of different teams that gathered throughout the day through either common planning time or just because they teach common grade levels. A lot of K-8 ends up being grade level specific. Once we get to the high school, it ends up being kind of course specific teams as well as grade level specific. So really unifying the work that those different teams are doing and being able to have some common protocols that they come back to routinely to analyze data or to provide intervention to specific groups of students has been a really good use of our time to increase our efficiency of those teams and make sure that everyone is feeling like that work is unified across the building as opposed to just different pockets of different things happening throughout the building. So those are a few things that we've really spent some time at the high school level focusing on for our educational excellence pillar.
So there's a presentation on this pillar, so now's the time for you to ask questions, make comments related to educational excellence.
You guys did great. Thank you for all the information.
You bet.
Is there a process that you follow once you have the collaborated classroom visits and, obviously they're gathering their input and such. When or how do you disseminate, what they learn to other folks?
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit, just because we've got our whole staff doing that. I know we've got different subsets at the other buildings doing it as well. But so when teachers go into a classroom, they're always going in with at least one other teacher. So then afterwards, they get together after being in the classroom. Those 2 or 3 teachers get together and kind of share their notes. So they're able to say, well, I picked up on this that I thought was really great, and I picked up on this thing. Usually there's a lot of overlapping feedback from that. They fill out a Google form that we've created that they're able to then share that feedback a little bit more globally. That comes to the administrative team, and we have a running spreadsheet of all these different positive things that we've seen then in our classrooms. And the end goal is for us to be able to take a look at those things collaboratively with the entire staff and be able to identify some common understandings of just solid tier 1 instructional practices that should be happening across the board, because hey, we saw these great things happening. We should all be able to level with each other that this is what great teaching looks like. Let's really hammer home some of these great tier 1 practices that we've seen happening and want to continue to kind of lift up building wide. So I think that's the goal, K-12. By the end of all of it, we're all at slightly different spots right now, but by the time it's all said and done, I think that's where we plan to be.
So the feedback happens virtually immediately.
Yeah, yep.
Super. Thank
Yeah.
you. Anything
Jamie,
else?
excuse me, Jamie, I just like you're back to basics. That's good. And you think it's working well. That's excellent. I think it's really good. And Aaron, I want to just compliment you because I think this is something that you've really, it's been a real emphasis on your part, which is try to make the whole district working together and, make it kind of a standardized, the whole bit. So I think it's really something that's changed dramatically since I was teaching. I know that.
Well, I can't take credit for that. If we weren't all believing that was the right way to go, it wouldn't happen. I mean, I know I'm very powerful, but but it's what we all want and can see is the best. I think the strategic plan was something that we've been hoping for and wanting for a long time.
And I agree with that, but at the same time, I mean, I think it's something that we always have wanted, and it just seems like there's been a real push on your part.
There's
I think
good
it's
buy-in. Yeah.
Is there a vision, because I applaud your efforts for the CCV within the building, but years ago, we did it across the district. And the benefit of that is that a high school teacher was actually able to observe what a 4th grade teacher or 2nd grade teacher, how they interacted with kids, and the reality of what the different age levels are all about. Is there any vision of doing that sometime in the future? Because otherwise, we're still operating in our silos, within a building, even though it's through different departments.
Yeah, it certainly is something that we'd look at eventually. To be honest, I think part of what we're doing is building people's comfort with having a colleague in their classroom, and so that would be certainly a future step. I could see that really evolving out of the curriculum councils.
That's what I was going to say.
So we're
Curriculum
kind of doing
council.
the same things,
Yeah.
right, at the same time. So then, as people become more familiar with somebody they really know well and really trust coming in, I could see that as being a nice next step, right? Is, okay, now as curriculum councils, we're gonna observe each other.
Just something to consider for the future.
Great idea. Okay, we're gonna move on to family and community engagement, our second pillar. Our objective here is bridging meaningful and constructive communication and partnerships to ensure equitable access, representation, and voice. So our key performance indicators really focus on that school perceptions survey results. The informed index, the included index, and and another tool that we also use that I'll tell you about in a second. So that informed index is really about parents feeling that they're kept up to date on their child's progress and what's happening in school. And so from the first year we did this to last spring when we did that survey, we saw a small increase from a 3.98 to a 4.1. What I will point out to you is, yes, that's an increase, but I would also say that a 4.1 on a 5-point scale is pretty good. And we're going to continue to grow that in the areas I'm going to share. The included index focuses on parents reporting that they feel welcomed, respected, and a part of the school community. Also saw an increase 3.9 to 4.05. We also developed an annual community engagement self-assessment, which it's not a quantifiable so much of a resource. It's more of us looking at a rubric of things that we want to improve on based on what research has shown as best practice and identifying areas. We use that to guide our action planning, which I will talk about now. So some of our district-aligned work is focused on making sure that our system of communication and the tool that we're using aligns with the purpose and the audience. So an example I'll give you family-wise is, when do we use email versus putting something in the newsletter? So we want to make sure we get people with the right form of communication when they need it. How do we use, you'll hear about Seesaw and Canvas to get information about their child's progress to them. Another part of it that really came out of that community self-assessment was increasing opportunities for families and community members to volunteer, both promoting what we do have and increasing those. And I know that's something that we're working on as a group as well. I would say when you talk about both of these issues, volunteering and communication, generally what you'll see is the buildings focusing a lot on parent guardians, and where I see our communications office in the district office, what I see me working on is the community engagement. So I'm developing a community newsletter that I've reached out to my colleagues around the area to see what they're doing, and I've got some nice models to develop from that. Lastly is focus on developing really authentic opportunities for our families and community members to get involved in providing us feedback and advice on different projects, different things we're struggling with, giving their input on a specific problem. So I mentioned about newsletters versus emails. That's something that our equity group focused on and provided feedback to us. We shared some ideas and they provided feedback. So kind of that really more targeted feedback on a specific issue. And that's something that you'll hear about as well. So we're going to start with Corey and Wabisa.
Thank you. So one of the first areas I'd like to highlight is that communication piece. And so for us, we have the Seesaw, that's our learning platform management system. And we got together K-5 at the K2 level. They had been using Seesaw for a few years. And so really with this feedback, we really wanted to elevate the idea that, like, how can we help families get sort of a glimpse into what their students are learning? Just the way it works at the elementary level, teachers are not inputting grades per se, as much. So we got together this summer and came up with a communication plan that really outlined the difference between Seesaw, email, s'mores, and really highlighting the fact that Seesaw is the connection point between parent, guardian, student, and teacher. So that way now when a parent is getting a communication through Seesaw, they're not confused. Oh, is this coming from the principals? No, it's from the teacher. So that's been helpful so far, and then we're going to do some midpoint check-in and get some feedback from parents this year. The other thing is community events. Aaron talked about the opportunities for families. Our equity action team last year, we kicked off our family fun night in the spring, and we did it again just recently. And partly we did it because of that feedback was we wanted to really have this positive, engaging opportunity in the fall for families. So just a huge shout out to so many people. We had community members, other district, Greg, came over and volunteered, other teachers from other buildings. We had high school students, our own staff. I think we had close to 40 of our staff members who volunteered that night. And we had, I think it was about 715 people show up that night. So just, Yeah, it was amazing.
Over
You know, I
there.
heard like, hey, we should get more parking. Yeah, well, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yep, so, but just awesome. We're looking to add new this year, a learning night opportunity. And this is the part that Erin talked about, getting some feedback, is we have some ideas of what we think parents might be interested in, but we're gonna ask them. But things like learning a little bit more about Seesaw, maybe they're struggling with that. Bridges math curriculum, if there's things with literacy that, we talked about tonight, social emotional well-being, things like that. Another change we made for engagement was our assemblies. We did some revamping in the last couple years, and so now at our assemblies, we have our students who are fifth graders who are leading the assemblies, so their parents are able to come and actually watch them lead the assemblies, and then our students who are receiving the awards are coming. So we've
to the newsletter, so people can just put things in there if they have questions, and we can get back to them. Opportunities for families. Again, we are offering more volunteer opportunities, or at least making them more people more aware of them. So, for example, we've had lots of families, obviously, who go to Timberley, so that's one that a lot of people know about, but also we're increasing our volunteers around our musical this year, so we have lots of parent volunteers helping with that. We also are, a big thing that we're doing at Indian Mound, and we started last year but continued, is a virtual family night that we taught families around Infinite Campus, Canvas, and standard space grading. We had a decent turnout for that, and we recorded it as well and linked it into our family newsletter so families can learn the differences between all the different platforms, how to use them, how to make sure they know what's going on with their scholar and their grades, and just things that are coming up for them. Also to know that if anybody misses school, you can go right to Canvas and see exactly what you need to do while your child is home ill, or if you're on a vacation or things like that. We also changed up our conferences a little bit. There's never a perfect way to do conferences. That is the truth. And we did switch up our conferences a little bit for 7th and 8th grade this year. We piloted it last year, and it's working pretty well, where our families are coming to one teacher, and that one teacher has input and comments from all of the students' teachers, so they're sharing that so that the families don't have to sign up for conferences with every single teacher. They can sign up with one teacher, and that teacher has the input. If they want to, they can sign up with other teachers, but it's not a part of kind of the system that we're trying. So far it's gone pretty well, and I got lots of positive feedback from families on how that went.
Great. At the high school level, some of the things that we are kind of expounding on are some of our family and community engagement sessions on different timely topics throughout the year. At the beginning of the year, we've got our 9th grade transition meeting that is presentation that is directly after our 9th grade transition day, where they come in and get led through all sorts of activities and tours and things by upperclassmen. We also this year had a standards-based grading presentation that same night for families, along with the introduction of some of our attendance procedures. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. We also have timely presentations about the new Wisconsin Guarantee and Direct Admit. Those were new last year, so still trying to be kind of proactively communicating with families around those, and there'll be some opportunities for families to continue to learn about those throughout the year as they pertain a little bit more to juniors, when we really need to start getting into the nitty-gritty of what how that rolls out. We always have advising night in February at the high school, which will be another opportunity for some engagement sessions when we have a pretty captive audience in the building. So we look forward to offering some of those same sessions during advising night, and then hopefully being able to expound on those a little bit. One additional piece to that night is always that 8th to 9th grade transition meeting that happens for 8th grade families coming up as they start to go through that registration process for their 9th graders classes for the following year. So that always ends up being pretty great timing for them to start thinking high school and get an introduction to the building and how the schedule looks, as it's a pretty unique setup for a first-time high schooler. This year, we also are putting a lot of effort into some proactive attendance communication with families. Last year, we really felt that we were reactive in a lot of our communication around attendance, just with different flags that we had set up as we started to note attendance concerns. We've started to address that, we believe, a little bit more proactively with families, and we've seen a lot of great success so far as we compare data from last year to this year regarding our student attendance, mainly in terms of tardies. And then just lastly, I don't have it in my document, but just to kind of go off of the learning management systems, we have put a lot of great use into Canvas, and we continue to really promote that with our teachers and with our families. We just recently ran some data and found out that 83% of our families have an observer account set up, which means there's a parent that can essentially get a bird's eye view of the student's Canvas and see how they are interacting on Canvas with teachers and the different info that's shared with students on a daily basis for each of their classes. So that was a pretty big number for the high school level, so we were happy to see that. Just really kind of drives home the importance of us using that consistently as teachers in the building as well. So that's the high school.
All right, when it comes to family and community engagement at CEPS, we have some great families, some very supportive families, and that's wonderful to work with. And when we hear from families saying, hey, look for more ways to involve us, keep us connected, communicate with us, that's just an opportunity you don't want to miss and skip out on. So there's a couple areas that I'll speak to for that at CEPS. One is specifically related to the opportunity for families to provide feedback and input. So each year, we host music programs for all 3 grades at CPS, and there is a cost associated with that. I mean, even behind the scenes, busing kids to rehearsal, getting a sub for the teacher, and you know, there's several factors that we wanted to consider just with the current budget status. And so we were thinking, you know, are there changes we want to make? Is this the opportunity to make those changes? But then kind of had a realization, and this came from the music teacher herself, Olivia. Why don't we ask families for that feedback and that input in, you know, to help get the best decision, because this is for the families. And so we decided, you know, we have a really good setup. We're going to run the music programs as we're used to this year. And then after the music program, so while it's still fresh on families' mind, we're going to survey families. We're going to get their feedback. Do you like the structure, the location, the time of day? You know, what are the pros, cons? What feedback do you have for us? And then we're going to use the family feedback forum, so kind of the method across the district that we're using to get a group of interested families together. We're going to have, a group of families at CPS go through that survey data and provide some thoughts for us as we use to plan from the music program moving forward. There's just lots of opportunities and options when it comes to that, but we want to make a great decision, and why not involve families? Again, because that's what the music program is for. In addition to increasing volunteers at the school this year, as you heard other schools are doing, another area that was perfect for considering family involvement is our open house. You're probably used to us holding our open house at CEPS each fall. We didn't host our open house this year for several reasons. In the fall, at least. A big reason we didn't hold it in the fall is that last year our equity action team spent the year brainstorming ways that we can use open house to involve families more and better than we currently have. So spent the year brainstorming ways we can, from start to finish involve families more, how we invite them into the building, what we have them do when they're in the building, increasing the ownership of kids because they take such pride in their space. How can we get families to connect with each other while they're in the building? And then how after the event do we get feedback about the event to plan for next year? So we're gonna hold an open house this year. It's gonna be later winter or spring. I've communicated that with families too, because they're wondering, are you holding it? And so we're really excited to be able to incorporate that thinking, and again, with the eye on increasing family involvement. Those are just two of the areas that we are doing that at CEPS this year.
Board.
I'm just curious, have we ever done, this crazy idea, but have we ever had like a grandparents I don't know, welcoming or something like that?
Not specifically, at least not in my time.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I mean, it might be an interesting way, again, to get people to come in
Yeah.
and work as mentors or whatever. And it's oftentimes, it seems those people come up with ideas or will talk to the teacher. I know kids would be probably interested to have their grandparents there too. I don't know,
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting. to
We've
look.
always invited all family members.
Yes,
to our
I know,
house,
I
but
know.
a
Not
specific
specifically,
focus
yeah,
on
yeah,
grandparents,
anyway.
yeah.
Greg, does kindergarten still have a grandparent day?
No.
Oh, they don't have that anymore, okay. Because that would have been another opportunity to have them get into the
Yeah.
building. Also to see if they're interested in going beyond that also, some of what
Hook
you
'em
were
in.
talking about.
Being a grandparent, huh?
Sounds like we have some anti-grandparent going on.
I
I don't want to hear about it. Specifically, Jamie and Brett, you have conversations with parents about standards-based grading? What are those conversations like nowadays? I mean, this, it's been, kind of a bear since we first decided that we need to go that way. Is most of your communication with parents positive?
I think for middle school, it's a little bit different than the high school, right? Because high school has GPA, but for the middle school, I really don't have very many conversations questioning it. When you take the opportunity to share just 2 or 3 sentences on what it is and why we do it, and it's to give students and families more information on where they're at and where they need to go, then the questions end, because it just makes sense to most people.
That's great.
Yeah, so at the middle school, I think people are just like, that's just how we do business.
Yeah, I'd say at the high school, because it's started to, I mean, I wasn't around for all of this, but trickle its way down, and now most of the high schoolers those families have experienced standards-based grading. A lot of our conversations at the high school end up being, what makes standards-based grading at the high school unique to our experience from our time in K-8. So it isn't so much the, standards-based grading topic, it's how does standards-based grading now apply at the high school when you have those additional pieces that you need to have for a GPA and a final
Yeah.
grade for each class and a
Right.
transcript and a college application, just how does this fit into that next piece? That's where most of our conversations end up being around.
I think, yeah, and part of that is because of, a reminder, students have experienced standards-based grading K-5 forever. Like, we all probably experienced that when we were kids. It was secondary that it was the change. And,
Yeah.
part of the way we rolled it out as a district was we had K-5 and then parts of the high school, and then most of the high school, and then all of the high school, and then the middle school. So now we're experiencing that, and the middle school started with 6th grade, then as they moved up to 7th, then up to 8th. So now we're at that point where you're hearing is the culmination of kids and families having experienced it all the way through, and kids coming from other districts that are also familiar with it. So it's not as abstract. There's always going to be questions and concerns about grading, no matter what model that you use, particularly as the stakes get higher in some people's minds at the high school level. But I think it's definitely a tribute to the staff and to the administrators for how they explain things to families and help them understand.
So along with that same line, I know y'all were talking about like the utilization of Canvas and Seesaw and whatnot, and how you're sending out your virtual sessions via newsletters. Do you guys have any of that hyperlinked on each school's website? Is that on there?
All of our family newsletters are linked to the website.
Okay, perfect. Because I could probably use a refresher on Canvas myself.
Yeah, so, there are actually, I would just direct you to the Canvas site. They have, every time that there's a Canvas question, I've yet to find a question that isn't answered by a 3-minute long Canvas explanation.
Love it.
That is better than I can ever do. So, we started to make our own videos until we found their help page, and I would highly recommend going
Because
and check that
I will
out.
neither confirm nor deny that there might be some of my other parental friends that are a little confused by Canvas as well. So,
And I'm happy to direct them there and help them find that video, but that's every time that we've started to create our own, we've found one that's better and shorter and more condensed. Made by
Perfect.
the people, find people at Canvas, so.
love that.
Yeah.
I could see people using that, that form, that question sort of form. It's like, I don't know who to ask this, but how do I find this on Canvas?
Yeah,
And I could see, then we respond with, here's a link to a 3-minute video
yeah,
on how to do that.
yeah.
So people are busy.
As a parent, this particular pillar feels a lot more tangible, and and now having been on the board for 2.5 years, I love seeing the transition of where it was and now where it's going and where we've come to, and it's vastly improved, like the communication and community engagement. And even what we learned from the referendum and how you guys are all incorporating that into the community engagement is really impressive and appreciative.
Anything else? Moving on.
All right, exceptional staff. There's 2 objectives in this area: providing an inclusive work environment that fosters open communication, collaboration, growth, and support to promote high levels of well-being among our staff. The second objective is to actively recruit and retain a diverse staff representative of a global society. So we measure our progress in these areas through, first of all, 2 indicators on the staff check-in survey that we do each spring. The engagement index, which is staff reporting that they like working at the school because they're valued, heard, and can contribute. A great, wonderful indicator. And we saw nice progress on that from our baseline of 3.66 to last year of 3.91 in the spring. And then the staff experience index, which measures staff's feelings of being accepted, respected, and supported at school. And that went from a 3.7 to 3.92. So again, making gains in those areas. The third indicator we look at is our staff retention rate. And that's remained relatively stable. We went from a 94.5% staff retention rate to a 93.9% staff retention rate.
Both are remarkable numbers.
They really are.
I
And
mean-
that includes retirements. So that's really a wonderful indicator of our culture here. So in terms of our work, what are some of our district practices? First of all, you'll hear a little bit about this, but the district is focusing on sort of a social emotional learning or well-being for all that includes our staff, right? So thinking about student, staff, family well-being, but also recognizing what our staff need to feel that sense of well-being that's in that first objective. So that is beyond sort of an absence of problems, but it's about feeling fulfilled in your work, valued in your work. And we'll have that professional development throughout the year for our staff from now and forever. It's kind of just an ongoing thing that we'll keep doing instead of being an initiative that we do once. The other thing that you'll hear about is having hiring practices and processes that really remove barriers for people to apply to positions. So if you recall, a couple of years ago, we had some experts come in and provide training for the administrative team about equitable hiring practices. So we've taken those components that we learned through that, and we're integrating them into a really redesigned hiring process that we're piloting this year, first with professional staff, so our teaching staff, student services staff, others. And then we'll expand to support staff and administrative staff if necessary, but we're hoping not to have to hire any administrators. So those are some of the processes that you'll hear talked about among our team. And now we're going to start with the middle school after Jamie takes it.
All right.
Okay, so for exceptional staff at Indian Mound, we're going to focus on pretty much on leadership and collaboration. So for leadership, and much of this is true at all the schools, if not all of it, to be honest with you, we are focusing on what is the role of a leader on our building leadership team. We're defining who are the staff, who has the characteristics that are leaders who are going to play these really important roles that we have on our leadership teams, and who are the champions of the work, and making sure that people are bought in and ready to go and rolling up their sleeves and doing some of that hard work. In the process of doing that, we are really using distributive leadership at all of the schools around PD facilitation. You heard Aaron talk about the social emotional learning for all. We have staff members from each of our schools who went through a training to present and learn about this professional development. And so at each of our schools, it's working with Brittany Brazel and other staff, but we have staff at each of our buildings who are presenting this professional development. We also are combining, the middle school and the high school are combining, and both the elementary schools are combining for some of the PD, because we're doing the same things. So instead of having to do something 4 different times, we're combining our staff to do the professional development together. So we, for example, have come over to the high school, and we're doing our PD here with the high school staff. And we're doing that as well with the curriculum council. So there's that collaboration going on there. Let's see. Oh, another area of collaboration through the middle school and high school in particular is really, we talked about standards-based grading, but also that high school transition. So we're having more conversations with administrators, with staff on how to bridge that jump from middle school to high school. We just met last week, and we talked about how we're going to be offering a few more resources to families on just what is that difference between the grading systems and how does that look differently. I know we just talked about that a little bit. But our 8th grade teachers really are invested in making sure that they're doing everything they can to prepare the students for high school. And our 9th grade teachers want to make sure that, the students coming in are ready for what's to come. The last thing I'm going to talk about is just utilizing survey results. This is all of us as well, and Aaron talked about this as well. So we have these great perception surveys, and our staff fill them out, our students fill them out, our families fill them out, and we're looking at them, we're using them, and they're helping us to guide the decisions that we're making to present these school-wide goals to you all, and also day-to-day in our work and our more detailed school improvement or continuous improvement plans that we have each of us have at our buildings that are this only more in-depth. We take all of those results in order to set those goals for ourselves and our staff.
Yeah, I think you heard from Jamie, a lot of it talked about 6-12 collaboration, especially when it comes to exceptional staff. There was just a lot of overlap there that we tried to capitalize on and tandem work with. But, the shared leadership piece is just something I wanted to lift up again. Every time we have a professional development day, we send a survey out to our staff to get feedback about kind of the different portions of our day. And every time, the most highly rated portions of the professional development day are the days that are led by their peers. I think they just see them as people that are doing the same thing on a daily basis. They can, cut to the chase and get to the pieces that they know everyone is going to benefit from and know what lies on the other side. And so they really appreciate that shared leadership and coming from peers. The continued work on transition and the 6-12 collaboration on, all things 8th grade to 9th grade is something that everyone is going to continue to work on. We want to be as perfect in that as possible, and we realize that there just is a difference in just being able to prepare students and families for what that looks like and get them as prepared as possible is something we're going to continue to try to fine tune. And I think we do a pretty good job of it as is. And I think there's always a few tweaks here and there that we can continue to get feedback from families on and from staff on, and try to perfect that even more moving forward. So I think that really highlights it best for the high school.
All right, when it comes to exceptional staff, I'm going to speak to staff retention. And there's a lot that goes into staff retention. Do you feel fulfilled in your role? Do you feel like you're making a positive impact? But another big piece of that is, do you feel supported in your work? And a big portion of that support comes from the people that you're working directly with, the people that are in the trenches with you. And I'm gonna share an example of that from CEPS this year that really stands out to me. I'm going to start at our first staff meeting of the year when all of the staff are together in August, but then I'm going to work a little bit backwards. I'm just going to speak briefly about the first staff meeting. One statement that I made stands out to me, and that was, in some way, everyone's role was changing this year. And when I say changing, I mean increased responsibilities. Why did I say that? Well, it stems from a conversation and planning that our leaders had at CEPS in August when we were planning for this year. There were several positions, a handful that just were not able to be filled due to April's referendum status, and that meant that we had to plan for what that was going to mean and what that was going to look like in our school. And so we started talking about things like supervision, all of the behind the scenes work that has to go into the planning and preparing for teaching and learning. And I admit I was a little nervous going into that conversation because it's stressful for people to think, I already have a very hard job, I'm working nonstop all day, and now I have to think about adding responsibilities. So I was a little nervous because I wanted it to go well, but we also had to get through it too, even if it was hard. But it went completely opposite of how I anticipated, but in a good way. All of a sudden, I had this realization that everyone around the table, without even needing me to prime the conversation, was saying, I can pick up, our team can pick up this supervision, we can pick up this, copy work that needs to be done. I'm using easy examples, but then it started to not evolve even into, hold on, make sure you're watching out for your team, like you're volunteering a lot. Well, because we want to, we want to help each other, and we stopped the conversation. We're like, this is amazing. We are having a conversation that, is very different from how this could have gone, and everyone's volunteering. So we've had to have a lot of changes this year is what I'm getting at. But people are so supportive of each other and the work that they're having to do and have such a positive outlook on it. That again, that word exceptional staff, that really stands out to me as an example of that. I'm going to do a quick connection back to the family and community engagement. When we think of the increased responsibilities, there's some easy stuff that we can just say, you know what, that was nice to do. We're letting that go. We can let that go and be fine with it. But there's some other things that we planned for where it's like, we need people to help. And that's another example linking back to that family and community engagement. We have lots of volunteers this year that are doing a lot of the stuff that staff might have done in the past. So nice connections there between the pillars too.
All right. At Wabisa, for exceptional staff, we'll kind of start with a highlight around staff retention as well. And using that feedback that Aaron had talked about, we really wanted to build around our asset to what keeps people there, and that's the connectedness to each other. So we did some revisions with our Sunshine Committee, which was a very reactionary committee in the past, like people have life events and so forth, and we felt like, we can still support people in another way within their teams. And so it was all about providing, our staff was saying, like, we want to find opportunities where we're hearing more from others. Yes, we talk to the same people on our same pod and so forth. So our Sunshine Committee is doing some cool things, like just providing, some coffee and cider, just little things like that, little music. The kids always want some of it, and we say, yep, go be a teacher, and in 10 years you can get some of this. And then, also playing some games, different activities. Like on Friday, they put together this emoji and sort of a phrase, and so it just kind of promotes staff to connect with those that maybe they're just not on a normal basis. The other thing, just a real simple thing in our weekly newsletter is we're nudging this forward, and we're seeing more people step forward with this, but sharing celebratory life events. Which is really cool. So, somebody announcing that they're a grandparent for the first times. Those types of things that, when they see each other in the hallway then, they just have a quick talking point other than, like, hey, it's, great weather, things like that. It was talked about the wellness for all. That's been really great. We took some of the feedback from our staff. And, we've all probably heard about the work-life balance. That's a thing that I don't know if anyone really strives or gets to the end point. But we did some additional feedback, and instead of finding some research best practice person is like, what are what are some strategies you use, and we're resharing those out just in little nuggets, like 2 or 3 of them in this newsletter, 2 or 3 in that one, because as we know, there is no perfect answer for everybody. So really kind of just using the collective wisdom of our staff to share. And then the last thing is that came out from our staff. You've heard about the progressive behavior response plan that we launched last year. That's still in need, and it fits within exceptional staff because, as we know, supporting students through their behaviors and their most social emotional needs, it's heavy, right? So we're continuing to try to be more consistent as a teacher to administration, student support, student service staff, and just really, making sure that teachers are feeling supported. They're getting the kids are getting what they need, and we're consistent with that. So we're continuing to make sure that's the focus, because 1 year, as we know, implementing something is not there. So.
I want to thank all 4 of you, plus your associate principals, and you, and then there's other people as well. It's one of the things that led me to want to get on the school board. And I just think we're very lucky. I mean, I think it's one of the things that makes McFarland special. But, this was a hard year in some ways. We lost a referendum. And it's like, I feel like in some ways we never skipped a beat. We stuck together. We've worked together. We talked about, the MFT going out there and canvassing. We've done those things, and I think you guys have all done a great job of making your staff feel supported. And it's never perfect, but it's about as good as I've ever seen. And I was a teacher for 40 years. I think you guys have been just exceptional. So thank you.
To my one question, kind of piggybacking on that, is that with this important vote happening tomorrow, do you anticipate any of these action steps changing depending on the outcome? I mean, it's kind of a loaded question. I don't know. But all of the items seem like they could go forward still to me, regardless of the outcome. I just don't know if it's.
I think the goals won't change for sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think, and again, others can speak up, but, I think we, just like students, we're going to be adaptive and pivot and support staff where needed. So depending on what's needed.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay.
I think if the referendum doesn't pass, it's going to be difficult to impossible to maintain the current level of morale among our staff. And people will be wondering, am I going to be cut? Is my colleagues going to be cut? Should I put in my notice now? Should I start looking for other jobs now? Those are going to be the kind of things. And so to be honest, I think, the work will continue because people will always put those kids in front of them, but they're going to be preoccupied with what's my future and where am I going to be working. And that's just the reality. So to be honest, I think if the referendum fails, I think this work will go backwards years. And it may be difficult to recover from. Not to be negative, but just the reality.
Almost my point was that it could have done that even in April.
Right.
And that's what I'm most impressed with.
Yep.
Yeah.
True.
Well, that's why it's so important people go out and vote.
You got it.
Because tomorrow's going
If
to be
you
a
haven't
great day.
already- If you haven't already.
Turn over for the ballot.
That's right.
Yes.
I think
Anybody
from-
needs a ride, I'll give you a ride.
I think from my observation, with what didn't happen in the spring, it took us away from our mission.
Did. yeah.
Absolutely.
Big time.
100%.
No doubt.
Because no longer were staff talking about curriculum instruction and all that. They had this big rock on their mind. But I applaud the district for overcoming that also. Acknowledging it, but not letting it interfere with their true mission. And that was to be instructors right in the classrooms. But my question is this, I don't know if this is the pillar. We're talking about exceptional staff. Have we seen any change in procuring staff of ethnicity in the district since we started all this?
We haven't done much hiring.
Pardon me?
At least at CPS, we haven't done much hiring.
That's actually a fair point,
Yeah.
is that we've hired fewer staff, partly because of our retention rate, and partly because, like at CPS, if someone left, we just didn't fill the position.
Yeah.
Hard to say.
For the large part, but I don't think we've seen a significant improvement. There's been, we have hired a few staff of color. There's a couple that come to mind in the process, but I would say when you look at our district, we, haven't implemented this new hiring process that we're hoping will remove barriers to people applying. The other part I would say is when you find the district that is effectively recruiting large pools of candidates for any position, regardless of race and ethnicity, that's a district I'd like to learn from, because we're all struggling to get 2, 3, 4, 5 people apply for any position, regardless of race and ethnicity.
Are we still working with the homegrown? The idea? Because I think
That
would-
idea's there, yeah.
Yeah, the idea. I mean, that's gonna take, the seed's been planted, it's gonna take a while to bear fruit, but I do think it's one way to do that.
I
And
think
by the way, that
addresses-
was a really good, play on the whole grow your own.
Yeah.
Seed has been planted. It'll take some time to.
Occasionally,
That was good.
I think grow your own addresses the teacher shortage,
Yeah, I
but
understand.
doesn't do much to talk about the race and ethnicity of future staff.
I will say, though, that there are pieces of the hiring practices that we haven't implemented yet, the whole kind of new rehaul of it, but there are pieces, for example, we're all having a question in interviews around equity and what are your beliefs and values around
Yep.
equity, right? So we're looking for candidates who have, the same kind of beliefs and values that our district holds around inclusion and diversity and equity and all the things that we talk about and are part of our district. So those are questions that we ask, and we look for people who have those values, whether or not they're people of color or what race or ethnicity they are. We want people who hold those values.
That's good.
I would say there is an opportunity for Grow Your Own to impact, when you have students of color, right, that may be exposed to teaching as a profession and think of that as an idea. We certainly, when you have the 15 seconds of fame and just every time there's somebody going into teaching, we all just cheer, right? And there's quite a few, and there's quite a few students studying right now. That's where I see the Grow Your Own having an advantage, where a person may never have thought of themselves as possibly being a teacher. Someone sees that in them, and we invest in them while they're in high school.
I actually was talking to a teacher just this past weekend, second grade teacher. 2 of her kids are now going to become teachers.
Nice.
Future Punzels.
Wonderful.
I just have a comment. Greg brought up that it was a bit of a surprise to see how readily teachers will volunteer to do things to back each other up. And in the decades that I've been around here, that's what our teachers do. I bet all of you could say the same thing. And that's just one of the things that makes this district so special and so unique, because sitting at tables at a national convention where you've got folks from all over the country. That's not usual. That is typically the exception to the rule in their districts, but that's one of the things that's always made McFarland very special, on top of a 95% retention rate. Other districts would kill for that. So kudos.
And I think what leads to that is the whole teaming aspect. I mean, our district was established on different types of teams. And over the 50 years now, we've expanded the different types of teams, but the core team is still there, teaching teams. Yeah, and they do support each other, they back each other up. You indicated, they started to volunteer their teams, and you had to, sort of, hold them back, so now be careful, And I think that would be the number one thing I would hear from teachers, is that we operate as a team. You'd be a teaching team, building team, district team. And I think that's what's different about McFarland versus many other school districts.
I'm just going to add the support from the administration. It's so important for a classroom teacher, because otherwise they can just be hanging out there to dry.
Sure.
So it's really important. Thank you.
All right, one more pillar to
One
go.
more.
And this one I'm gonna do, all by myself. So unfortunately, you're not gonna get to hear from these wonderful colleagues, but there's two objectives in resource allocation. And the first is to create a fiscally and environmentally responsible operational plan that is equitable, sustainable, and adaptable to evolving needs and priorities. And the second one is deepening our investment in district diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts through community partnerships and district actions. And so our key performance indicator is not as much a quantifiable thing as it is a commitment to making sure that we align the portion of our budget to the three pillars. I think Tom's example earlier about literacy professional development is a good example. We've prioritized financial resources a significant amount to that. It's in our strategic plan. In terms of our district-wide work, it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it just to make sure that everybody knows we acknowledge it. This starts with the referendum and having a balanced budget. First time we have not had a balanced budget in many, many years that we can remember. And that really is the largest issue, because we can't accomplish any of the things in the strategic plan without adequate financial resources. So that in and of itself, creating a sustainable and adaptable operational plan is key to that. Along with the referendum is obviously advocating for state funding changes. Some other things we are doing, though, is we are having a third-party evaluation of our sustainability, the functionality and safety of all of our facilities. So that's a way both to look for how we can be environmentally responsible, but also fiscally responsible. Are there ways to accomplish both of those things at the same time? For example, when we run our heating and cooling systems, are there ways to maximize resources there? So there are experts in that area that we are working with, and then we'll implement long-range plans to address those needs. And sometimes you need to invest in some technology or updated systems to save money and be environmentally responsible in the long run. We're also looking at continuing to evolve our safety systems. We've really come a long way in our safety practices in the district. We develop a solid reunification process that we practice, and also looking at evacuation sites, cybersecurity. These are things that are happening. They're not often discussed or glamorous necessarily, but they're very important. One of the things you'll see in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion is that the Strategic Plan Committee talked about this at length, about integrating this work into all of our pillars. So we're going to talk about it separately. We have deepened our investment from all of the things you heard about in educational excellence and exceptional staff and family and community engagement. If you go back and hear what we talked about, it all talked about inclusion, engagement, involvement, feeling welcomed, valued, and respected. And that's for all of our students, all of our families. And so it's really integrated in all we do throughout, as opposed to some performative thing that we do on the side in addition to all of those things. So proud of that work. And of course, tangibly, there are things that we're doing, and you've heard from Brittany Brazel talk about some of those things, but it's really much broader than any one person or any one role or commitment. So those are just some things to highlight in that area. Any other questions, comments from the board on this pillar or any other pillar?
Great job.
I like the format
Yeah.
today.
Great.
Thank you for all your efforts.
Yeah, and I'm just adding on this thing, the whole idea of sustainability, because I got involved with that. I mean, I was on that committee, and I just, in some ways, economics is, when we're talking about sustainability, we think of it typically environmentally, but involving the community. And again, kudos to you, because it's a process. It's a work in progress, or progress. But the truth is, we have made tremendous strides of working with the community. We have 70% of the people in this district don't have kids, and hopefully tomorrow we're going to get support from those people, because we're starting to recognize, even in your little walking program, it's a great idea to the public. And I mean, there's so many things that we can do, grandparents, whatever. I mean, it's ways to try to make the school really belong to the community. And I just think the more we can do that, the better. So thanks for all you do.
Well said.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thanks.
Have a good weekend. Oh, that's
Weekend.
Go
Is it Friday?
Go get some sleep, a little bit.
We didn't go that long, but sorry.
No, that's a big tease.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye, y'all.
See you guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing before we adjourn, and that's, I hope everyone understands how important this election is and makes their way to their polling place if they haven't already voted. Couldn't be a more important election, ever. And with that, I would look for a motion.
I have a comment. I know Aaron was here Friday night at the performance greeting guests. I was here Saturday night, and Bruce was here Sunday. Oh, okay. I spoke to probably 22 different parents or whatever, and I would say 20 of them, couples, had already voted. And voiced
78
support.
million people have voted already,
I know.
Nationally?
nationally. I mean, what's our population, 300 million? Something like that? That's incredible. So,
Be a momentous day.
absolutely. I would look for a motion to adjourn.
I will make that motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I will do that.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much, one and all. And thank you, Melanie, for joining us this evening. Always a pleasure.
Starting forward.
Close we are to the time.
Very close.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
Within moments. Well, we didn't have the high school report.